Oh, you're still here after that? Well, you're really not missing anything not covered by that intro, but I've been told I shouldn't tell people to click off my video, so let's go through the long version of these chapters. Chapter 3 opens with a cutscene from 14 years ago, where a small expedition braves this cold and inhospitable mountain, bringing along what would have to be a 4-year-old Shulk. They reach some ancient-looking stone doors embedded in the ice and enter, though we don't know if they came here for shelter or some other purpose. Panning up, we see a beam of light leave their location as the ice lights up a strong blue. Once the snowstorm has passed, Dixon catches up to the rest of the expedition and finds them all dead. The soundtrack plays up the eerie suspense and mystery. In a central chamber, he spots the expedition's sole living member, Shulk, huddling beneath a glowing monado. Was it responsible for all of their deaths? Dixon carries Shulk out of the cave and back to civilization, leaving the monado behind for some reason. So, what was that place? Why was Shulk spared? Why was Dixon trailing so far behind the rest of the expedition? Who thought bringing a 4-year-old into an Arctic expedition was a good idea at all? On the bright side, at least Shulk's parents can't recklessly endanger him anymore. Wait, sorry, the Monaldo archive, an official out-of-game source, actually clears this up. It explains that his parents didn't decide to bring a 4-year-old to a mountain expedition because they were too cheap to hire a babysitter. Actually, he was born on the expedition, meaning it took at least 4 years, assuming his mom was heavily pregnant when setting out. So, is it gonna take us 4 or 5 years to travel the world too? Oh, wait, hold on. The Monado archive contradicts one of the hearts we'll see later. It doesn't matter. I can't decide what's worse, bringing a 4-year-old to a dangerous expedition, or bringing a pregnant woman and then raising her newborn on said dangerous expedition. It's absurdly dumb either way. Word of God from official sources like the Monado archives can be a pretty great tool at times, but it clearly also leads to complications. The game has to be able to stand on its own, and it always takes precedence over external sources your average players never heard about. So when I look to this book for answers in the future, it's purely out of desperation due to a failing of the game. Back in the present, we cut back to mere moments after we last saw Shulk and Rhine, except the time of day has changed for some reason. I'm honestly just surprised we don't see Dumban still sitting in his window mumbling about seizing destiny or whatever, since these guys stopped walking the moment that cutscene ended. They're planning where to actually go, since they got no clue where Metalface is. Colony 6 is the only other Homs colony left, as Shulk tells the player with his best Wiki impression, and it's right on the way to Sword Valley, where the thought-to-be-extinct Mechon have a base that somehow wasn't a sign they were still around, so it's a good place to start. To get there, we must pass through a previously closed door in Magmal Ruins, and I want to go on a tangent about the door, but the Gem Man just opened his stall and we have 15 more quests in Colony 9 that just became available, as well as another 8 in the caves. So what really happens is that Shulk and Rhine change their minds immediately after setting out on their journey, so that they can mess about for another hour or two. I guess their revenge quest isn't exactly urgent, but it feels downright out of character to do these quests now. Nonsensical or not, it's what we do. Fortunately, the quests have gotten a lot better. Out of the 23 new quests, only 4 are generic collection and material quests, which is a great start, but the quality of the other quests go up as well. Let's quickly go over them so we can get back to the part of the game people actually care about. Francois is sad because Mechon trampled her flowers, so we get her some new ones. That's the entire quest. Shulk will comment that he understands what it's like to lose something important, which is comedy gold considering the circumstances. These flowers and Fiora's death are the only tangible consequences the Mechon assault had on the colony. I guess there's also some very minor copy-pasted rubble, and in the future there's a chain of 2 quests that amount to people being sad since the attack, but that's basically nothing. The only confirmed losses were Fiora and some flowers. No other named NPCs except possibly the Colonel and the guys that only Rhine cares about. No unnamed loved one of a named NPC, no building was even destroyed. It really undermines the cool set piece that the attack was. Honestly, the most interesting part of this quest is the conversation with her husband Arnaut afterwards. Apparently, he lives over in the military district and never comes home, which makes me really struggle to reconcile the size of the colony with how big it might canonically be. The Defense Force Colonel shouted at his soldiers for failing to get back to the military district from the residential district in 40 seconds. Even if that's a tenth of a realistic time, it's still close enough that Arnaut has no reason to never come home, and it baffles me how they talk like he lives really far off. Anyway, the reason the conversation is interesting is because we can choose to help or sabotage his marriage. Francois says she wishes he could come home more. Fuck yeah, got it right first try. We can either tell him that, or say his family's doing fine without him. The latter pushes his marriage to the brink of divorce, the former fixes it. It's a neat little way to get to know the citizens and affect the world even outside of quests, though I wonder how many players would ever run into this naturally. So let's look at some better quests. Curryman Giorgio appears to be working himself to death. Shulk gets a vision confirming he literally is. Giorgio isn't concerned since he's working so hard for the sake of his daughter, however he isn't the one giving us an objective, it's the vision that compels the party to action. From now on, Shulk's future visions will be used to contextualize and flesh out some of the quests. Focusing on visions give the otherwise basic quests a unique twist different from other games, but there are also branching resolution options from it. Either we convince him to change, or we speak to his daughter Paula who sims for Rhine. Unfortunately, the implementation of the quest branch could be better. The instant you talk to either Giorgio or his daughter, you're locked into that path, and one of those is just a single A press away. Inattentive players might miss this branch entirely, and players that do notice might just speak to Giorgio as it's the easiest option right now. I, of course, speak with Giorgio. Not because it's easier, but because Paolo is a Rhine simp and I want nothing to do with her. Next step is Giorgio telling us to get him some nutritious Armu milk, which will keep him from collapsing, so we kill some baby Armuidae to harvest milk from their still warm corpses. Now he can get back to working as hard as ever to serve curry to the people of Colony 9. Wait, why do the babies produce milk? If you do speak to Paula instead, she will pretend to faint in order to get attention from her dad. In order for her to do a convincing job, we get her some weeds that make you pass out. Giorgio realizes he's been neglecting his daughter and decides to cut down on his hours. Local writer Leopold is in massive debt to King Squeeze, which he will never be able to pay back. His debts keep growing while the stress from the debts is keeping him from writing, so he barely even has an income anymore. Shock sees a vision where King Squeeze will seize all of Leopold's assets if we don't help. We confront King Squeeze, who tells us that Leopold's issue is that he spends too much of his money on his girlfriend instead of paying back his debts. But oh no, another vision! Leopold's girlfriend, Sylviane, who also happens to be the sister of Francois from earlier, was planted by Mr. Squeeze to seduce Leopold and make him waste all his money. Also that Squeeze can seize Leopold's house and retire. We now have two options. Either we speak to Sylviane about what's going on, or we tell Leopold everything. Compared to the previous quest branch, this is a much better choice, though I wouldn't quite call it perfect. It's just as easy to miss that the branch exists, but at least both choices are equally easy to choose by accident. What I dislike is that it's too easy to accidentally choose the wrong person, since they stand right next to each other and targeting NPCs tend to occasionally be a bit jank. Press the wrong one and you're locked in. If we speak to Sylviane, she tells us she's starting to feel bad for Squeeze's victims and wants out. She threw some secret orders of the Central Plaza a while back, and if they aren't ruined, we might be able to use them to blackmail Squeeze. For all she's done, she seems to be happy with Leopold. She doesn't really say that she cares about him or anything, but that she appreciates that he takes care of her. We show the plans to Squeeze Man, and he tells us he will stop hounding Leopold for money, that he'll tell Sylviane to stop bleeding the poor man dry, and that he'll even give us a reward for our discretion. As a final comment, Squeeze tells us that Leopold got himself into this mess by spending all his money, borrowing more, and spending it all. King Squeeze simply took advantage of a man who already had problems. If we instead speak to Leopold, he refuses to believe his girlfriend is involved, but does fully believe that King Squeeze is plotting to take his home as repayment for all the debt he's unable to pay. Kinda seems like he should stop taking out loans instead of blaming Squeeze for wanting his money back, even if he is being taken advantage of, but let's see where this goes. He wants to collapse Squeeze's entire business to become debt-free. For that, we collect ingredients for a poison, plant it on him, and then Leopold publicly catches him having the poison and even writes an article about it. Oh, he's a journalist! Now it makes sense. Squeeze disappears from the game after this, and Leopold is now debt-free. Okay. I find the aftermath the funniest part of this quest, though. Talking to Leopold, he'll tell us he had lunch with his friend Arnaut. If we got rid of Squeeze, then Arnaut will have said Leopold's writing lost its edge. If we only make Squeeze let up a little, then Leopold's writing will be better than ever, keeping its edge and grit while now also having a lot more humor in it. So, forcing him to deal with the consequences of his own actions, keeping him in debt and desperate for money, makes him work harder and produce better articles, while he gets worse when there's no economic pressure because he framed his creditor for attempted murder. By the way, I've been told by reliable sources that this is a highly political left-leaning game, so yeah. For those who are really paying attention, it's also kinda neat and makes sense that Leopold and Arnaut would be friends considering their significant others are sisters. Right, time for quest chain. We find a gang hiding in a secluded corner of the colony, with their leader Sesame talking about some plan. Refusing to give any details, he asks the party if they are in. They accept the job and get some brog drops without hesitation, though the objective reads that they will help but keep a close eye on developments. Because keeping an eye out will stop them from being accomplices, I guess. We turn the stuff in and we're told to deliver it to Betty. Betty gives us a mysterious bag, we hand it to Sesame and are still not given any info on this whole plan. Sesame needs our help with the next part of the plan. He mocks us for still not having caught on to what the plan is about, because it's so obvious, but refuses to elaborate, of course. The job is basically the same as last time. Get some monster drop, talk to Sesame, hand the shells to Kenny Rowan, who doesn't want it known he's working with Sesame, get a fragile and secretive package, and return it to Sesame. Sesame has a final job for us and still refuses to tell us anything, just that we are part of the gang now and that we need to keep quiet. The quest text tells us to stop the plan if it appears too dangerous, but that's not an option. We just gotta kill a really tough bird, so we do. Next is to check out the street lamp at the entrance to the market district for some reason, and there's something about a kaboom, but Shulk and Rain doesn't pick up on the red flags. Turns out the obvious distraction was a distraction, and only now does Shulk say we have to stop Sesame. Return back to him and he tells us to simply look up at the sky as there's a fireworks show he's put together. He wanted to brighten up everyone's lives with fireworks, and insisted on doing it in the most suspicious looking way he could. Maybe these quests would have benefited from an opt-out at any point and stopping the whole chain for a different ending, because otherwise all this baiting just seems silly. I'm also not giving the game credit for this quest showing consequences of the attack. It makes no mention of it, and just says everyone is sad, not to mention the gang can be seen plotting this already in Chapter 1. Even if it was possibly a ploy to distract people from the sadness of the Mechon attack, it's extremely shallow to summarize the toothless attack on their city by saying it bumped people out. People allegedly died, but of course no one who anyone knew. So, the quests are a little bit better, still nothing great, nothing that tells us what makes Colony 9 special from a generic starting town, and no characters to get attached to, but it's a step up from before. Then, back in the last video, I had to run into Tephra Cave to cover the cutscenes before I did side quests, all for the flow of the video. I have to do it again here, except I basically have to clear the entire chapter before continuing. There are several cutscenes inside the cave as we go further in, and there are quests telling us to go past each of those points, so my options are to either pick up all the quests and do them at the same time as I do main story, more or less, or start by clearing the caves before I turn back and grab more quests. It breaks the flow of the game a bit, even more so than the quests we already did. The easiest way to actually engage with all the side quest stories is by doing them one at a time and paying attention to the plotline. Otherwise you'll forget which quest was which and why you are doing them. As I talked about in the last video, I think the game really wants me to take my time, immerse myself in the world and get to know all the characters, which makes this a conundrum. It's not a huge issue I suppose, but it would be a slight mark if it becomes a pattern. For now, let's head into the caves. Or maybe I should go gem crafting. No, that's the work of the devil. We go to the caves. We retrace our steps from last time until we reach the door that was locked before. This door has always been closed, according to some nameless soldier standing next to it. Ryan suggests, contrary to my speculation before, that the door must have opened during the Mechon attack, similar to how the defense systems were triggered. That implies then that no one has ever gone through before, begging the question of how anyone enters or leaves Colony 9. But wait, there have been traders passing through this door that has always been closed, judging by the lamps they set up to guide them, as well as the dead traders we'll find a little bit later. So contrary to a main story cutscene and a random NPC dialogue, the door did in fact used to be open. Yay! But also, this cave is incredibly linear and there's really only a single possible way through, which takes us through a whole load of enemies, past several unique monsters, and through a mandatory boss fight. So how have any traders ever survived coming through? This really doesn't make a lot of sense, but I know I'm being pedantic here. The game is giving contradictory information for pragmatic reasons while hoping we don't think about it very hard. They needed to keep us in Colony 9 for the first 2 chapters, so the door was closed. They didn't want the Pokemon excuse of a man blocking the road because reasons, so they just said it's always been closed just to handwave it away. When we encounter it again, we simply get a cutscene of Ryan and Shulk expositing that the door that was closed last time we ran past is now open, so we're free to leave. Simultaneously, they want the colonies to trade and stay in contact with one another, because that would make a lot of sense. And thus, this door that blocks all traffic in or out of the colony must have been frequently passed through. Rather than say that Colony 6 usually visits through any form of flying vehicle, they had them go through the cave so they can place these lights, which also serves to guide the player. They even placed some dead merchants in the middle of the cave because we needed Shulk and Ryan to have a reason to stop so we could get more story cutscenes. It's all very pragmatic, but it doesn't add up in universe. And while that's something I can largely accept when it comes to game mechanics not being a one-to-one match with the narrative, it's a bit worse when the narrative contradicts itself as it's trying to enable the gameplay. And the fix is easy. The door closed as an emergency measure due to the approaching Mechon. Traders did used to come through a lot, it just happened to be closed last time we passed through. It doesn't do anything to explain how the traders walk through the dungeon and pass the boss at the end, but it's still an improvement. Okay, let's speed up a bit since I already covered several cutscenes from the caves. Door was closed but it's now open, lamps were set up by traders, and then the boys find some dead traders in the cave. Ryan recognizes from their emblems that they must be from Colony 6, which I can only assume is due to his military experience, considering these so-called merchants look exactly like soldiers. Shulk, on the other hand, is more concerned about those the merchants left behind, as it's likely they had families. I can only take this as a sign that he's come to regard death in a new light now that he has first-hand experience with what it's like to be left behind when a loved one dies. It's a small but neat touch, and I'll take any one of those I can get. Ryan, however, doesn't understand why he'd say that, making me question if Shulk truly is the one lacking in emotional intelligence here. The boys decide to bury the traders in order to return them to the Bionis. On one hand, there appears to be some neat foreshadowing about returning life to the Bionis, especially considering how the Bionis sword, the Monado, was just shown to drain homes of their life in the flashback we started the chapter on. Lots for the players to think about. But, on the other hand, this dialogue is causing me pain. Oh right, that's the way of the Homs. Why would you say things that way? Ah right, we should have a funeral as that is human custom. How can I take these characters seriously and think of them as people when they speak like exposition-spouting machines half the time? No person would ever speak like this. They bury their dead, which tires them out enough to need a nap. And I'm just sitting here wondering if the Monado works well as a shovel. It should be able to lightsaber its way through the rocky ground without a problem at least. Well, as long as the rocks aren't made out of Homs. Also, how did Ryan get tired from burying the dead with his training regimen? If he can do 1,000 squats and sit-ups without even considering it a big deal, he should be able to do this with these too. Unless his training is just so uneven he lacks the upper body strength for digging. Right, campfire conversations. Ryan, being either very smart or very dumb, wonders why the Mechon attacked and if it may have something to do with the ancient battle of Mechonis and Bionis and their creation myth. Shulk's response implies that it's possible Mechon need Homs simply for energy, but he believes there's another reason. It would be nice if he said why he believes that, or what he believes it to be, as that would flesh out his way of thinking and showcase his intelligence. But whatever, I'm sure there will be plenty of other scenes where he does that. Ultimately, Ryan doesn't care what the reason is and will avenge Fiora no matter what. Shulk, of course, feels guilty because he couldn't save her, despite his vision. Off-screen, after Fiora's death sometime, Dixon told Ryan about the expedition 14 years ago, and that it's why Shulk can use the Monado when no one else can. Except Amban. He wonders if that's why Shulk dedicates his life to researching it, and Shulk confirms it's partly to remind himself of his parents. Good on him for figuring out deep-rooted psychological issues subconsciously driving his conscious motivations, I guess. Mostly though, it's because he believes that the humongous titan they live on somehow used the Monado to kill the Mechonis, despite the logistical issues of swinging a weapon so small compared to yourself, you'd be better off using your own nail clipping or an eyelash. Oh, and for future Monkus' sake, I just want to emphasize that Shulk said he was interested in the Monado mainly because of the creation myth. Dead parents was only a lesser part of his reason. I get that this legend exists because there's some truth to it, somehow, but they really haven't sold me on the idea that this would be a tale the characters would actually believe. Maybe if we had seen the Monado transform to suit the wielder, then I could see it. But hell, the Mechonis sword is big enough to be referred to as a valley. Imagine how big the Monado must have been in the hands of the Bionis. It would be an entire landmass of its own, ignoring the fact that the opening cutscene showed it as just being pure energy. Maybe the Bionis really did hold on to this dust particle-sized sword, which was used to generate a light blade the size of a small country. I find this entire scene pretty stilted, and it's boring how Shulk is just outright stating his every motivation so robotically. That on top of how Ryan would likely already know all of this, the Monado legends making little sense, and them only briefly name-dropping Fiora with very little emotion only to move swiftly on. And yet, this one-on-one conversation accomplishes more for these characters than any the game has shown us thus far. It does actually flesh out one of its participants, which is somehow an improvement from previous scenes. Only took them until chapter 3. After their chat, it's time for Shulk to take a nap and for us to get some plot. The world turns black and white and Shulk finds himself standing in an alien location with black stone pillars containing lights at their cores. Another man is with him, obscured by strong dusty winds.
Do you wish to change it? The future. It is every man's desire to change the future. Even if everything has been predestined, will you not oppose it? The Monado is now in your hands. The Monado will grow with you. If you can find the true Monado, the future is yours.
For now, this is mostly nonsense, as we don't yet quite understand how the Monado works, but I have a feeling we should keep this scene in mind. This is probably a good time to bring up the possible meaning of the name Monado. Something I briefly discussed in a section that I ended up cutting from the last video mere hours before release. If you're not sure where it would have been relevant for me to talk about it, that's why I cut it. I have found two possible meanings for the name, which I find applicable to the game, one of which is relevant here. Possibly the most widespread explanation for the name is to connect it to the monad from Gnosticism. In Gnostic teachings, the monad is the one true God with infinite power. In contrast, the Christian God and most other singular creator gods are considered to actually be the Demiurge, an evil being who created the material universe and thus caused suffering to come into existence. The end goal of Gnosticism is for mankind to achieve enlightenment, gnosis, so they can escape this universe of suffering and transcend into perfect unity with the monad and all other souls. Through this interpretation, the Monado could be connected to the true God and contain divine power, and we will likely end the game by using it to kill the Demiurge to set the universe free. Considering the Monado allegedly belonged to the Bionis, whose Japanese name Kyoshin means giant god, we already have some evidence to suggest we are on the right track with this interpretation. Finding the true Monado could thus mean the Bionis is a false god with a false divine sword, possibly making him out to be a Demiurge-like figure. The same could be said for the Mechonis too. The Japanese name Kishin means machine god after all, but so far we have no reason to believe there's any other Monados than the one belonging to the Bionis and the true one. Either way, we do have two potential false gods ready to be used as antagonists. The second explanation for the name will have to wait just a little bit longer. The soundtrack playing right now, A Spiritual Place, was for some reason removed from the scene in Definitive Edition, being replaced with eerie silence. While that's not necessarily a bad decision, it's a little sad since this track is used only in moments that are very strongly connected to one another, with this being the very first scene that's appropriate. Repeating the track only in these scenes can serve as a subconscious reminder of the preceding events and the building mystery, so it's a shame they removed it from the moment this mystery began. The track is also connected to another track, Ancient Mysteries, that is used equally well throughout the game. Both A Spiritual Place and Ancient Mysteries briefly share the same melody, hinting at their connection. Since we heard Ancient Mysteries back in Magmel Ruins in Chapter 1, getting to hear A Spiritual Place here might allow some players to connect the dots and wonder how a ship lodged into a mountain is connected to this dream about the Monado. Shulk hears Ryan's voice and sees a vision of him being chased into a corner by hordes of baby arachno, only to be killed by a massive one. He keeps hearing Ryan call out to him and he wakes up, apparently sleeping in the traditional Slav squat position, only to find Ryan assaulted by baby arachnos. Oh no. This is a bigger fight than we are used to, but good use of the party members' area attacks and possibly even chain attacking makes short work of them. We also get a new battle theme for these spiders, which doesn't play if you simply aggro another enemy in the cave, so I suppose it's meant to be special. And yes, I might be panning out this section so that I can play a longer snippet of the track. I'll explain why later. After the fight, we get a reminder of the cutscene we literally just watched as Shulk repeats almost every line Mystery Boy told him in his dream.
The Monado is now in your hands. The Monado will grow with you. If you can find the true Monado, the future is yours.
Utterly unnecessary. Speaking of unnecessary, Shulk then receives a repeat of the exact same vision of Ryan dying again because Xenoblade 1 likes to repeat itself. So Shulk tells Ryan about the vision of his upcoming demise and warns him to be careful, which Ryan immediately believes as he hasn't questioned Shulk's vision about Fiora. Except that doesn't happen because Shulk stays quiet and decides not to tell Ryan because, I don't know.
I could tell Ryan. But I don't know.
Imagine not telling your best friend information that might save his life because I don't know. We walk for about 10 meters and are treated to a scene of the boys looking at some egg sacs with mechon parts attached to them. Shulk then receives a repeat of the exact same vision of Ryan dying again because Xenoblade 1 likes to repeat itself, which Shulk reacts to even though nothing in the vision matches current events. Thus, Ryan gets kidnapped through a hole in the ceiling by an arachno. Okay, didn't see that one coming actually. Not sure how Shulk would have been able to prevent that, nor how this even works out logistically. Besides, if that web was sticky enough to instantly tangle up Ryan and pull his full weight such a distance at that speed without him getting loose, I don't see him getting out of it ever. Shulk runs after Ryan, or I guess he just runs in a different direction, hoping to eventually bump into him. The track playing is called Urgency, and it literally only plays here and during the spider attack earlier. It's not a bad track at all, so it's baffling that it may as well be renamed to Tephra Cave Spider Theme. The track ends as soon as we reach the boss room too, making the track even more strangely underutilized. Shulk finally catches up to Ryan only to see things happen just like in the vision, except the Monado gets a new power to bail Ryan out and protect him from death. So now we know that the Monado can sometimes give him powers to alter the events he's seen. But why didn't he get a power like this to save Fiora? Was he simply not experienced enough with the Monado at that point, or did the Man in the Dream perhaps do something to unlock powers hidden within the Monado? Not knowing the mechanics behind these unlocks, it comes off as an incredibly convenient Deus Ex Machina, but that may change with time as more of the Monado secrets are revealed. Maybe. It's also the final Monado art we unlock, so now we can safely say there's absolutely no through line to the unlock conditions. We get it whenever the writers and designers want us to, with no internal consistency whatsoever. Or maybe not. But perhaps now that I've seen that vision of the future, I can change it by paying extra attention to when the arts are unlocked. Maybe Future Monk has missed something. Getting back to the art itself, a point of praise is how well the narrative and gameplay interacts. In the previous video I mentioned how Mekon's damage resistance helps sell how strong they are and how powerful the Monado is for ignoring it, even if the implementation was a bit lackluster during the raid. If nothing else, it helps you understand the absolute terror Mekon must represent to regular soldiers, especially when those soldiers are outnumbered. Here again, we get an integration of mechanics and narrative as we unlock the vision mechanic in combat. Now we see how our party members will die horrible deaths unless we use our arts, like Monado Shield, to prevent it. The cutscene showed the first time Shulk used Monado Shield, and now we have to use it many times throughout the fight to stop Ryan from being killed by the very same attack we saw thrice in Shulk's vision. This ludonarrative harmony raises the bar for the rest of the game a bit, since aligning game mechanics with story is something that surprisingly few games can pull off. You get some points for trying, but that also means I expect it will keep trying. In the gameplay, we don't have to use the Monado to change the future. Warning Ryan is enough, if he uses that warning to take the proper countermeasures. So while this situation may have been necessary for Shulk to learn Monado Shield, the gameplay suggests Ryan could have easily lived if Shulk had just warned him about the vision earlier. So in a way, it was kinda necessary for the plot that Shulk refused to tell Ryan about his vision, even though he definitely should have said something. On the other hand, Ryan got pulled up through a hole in the ceiling, which was not even slightly covered by the vision, so I doubt a warning would have even done much. No one could expect such a bizarre method of getting hunted by a horde of baby arachnos, so they could just as easily have had Shulk warn him, but without changing anything after that point. If Ryan hadn't ran into the dead end, he'd likely still have been killed by the arachnos anyway, so even knowing he would likely die here, he had no choice. Either he dies immediately to baby arachnos, or he maybe dies to the big arachno later. This would also serve the extra purpose of making us wonder if it's actually possible for Shulk to change major events with words and actions alone, or if he can only do it with Deus Ex Monado powers. So, having Shulk actually warn Ryan, but accomplishing nothing with the warning may have been a slight improvement, but ultimately my biggest change would be to find a better way to split them up. That is of course easier said than done, since Ryan needs to end up somewhere Shulk can't follow. Maybe a cave-in would have been preferable, with Shulk simply seeing the arachno gather around Ryan through the gaps between rocks, but then the cave-in would need to be justified, so it's tricky. More time could have been spent fleshing this all out, especially considering how well crafted the events were in the previous two chapters. Here instead, things are just happening without much causal relationship. Anyway, let's talk about the Arachno Queen, the boss fight of this chapter. She's surrounded by about a dozen smaller arachnos as well as 5 unhatched pods that will awaken during the fight. Her most notable attack is her talent art Arachno Crush 1, which will force a vision every time it's about to be used. Simply use Monado Shield when the vision pops up and you have nothing to worry about. Though this leads to the dilemma of whether you want to chance using Monado Buster to kill some of the smaller arachno, or if you want to save shield in case the queen uses her one scary attack. Or maybe it would have in another world. I mentioned in the last video how the 2 ancient machines from chapter 1 wasn't an engaging boss fight despite their many mechanics, and that is even worse here. Even when attempting a 0 side quest run, this fight was trivial. You see, there's this funny little quirk to how chain attacks work, where you get about a full bar of party gauge per kill during the chain attack. This means that you really don't need to focus the adds at all. Just start up chain and abuse the constantly increasing damage numbers to kill a few of the weaker arachno, and when the chain ends, you should have gotten 3 kills so you can start it again. No Monado art is even needed because you don't stay in regular combat long enough. Maybe this wouldn't be such a big deal under normal circumstances, but for some reason the devs decided to start you with 2 bars of party gauge already filled out, as well as your Monado art ready. The boss then immediately uses her talent art, triggering a vision, and when you smash the vision with Monado Shield you get a nice bit of party gauge. Oh, and Ryan has some pretty good attacks that hits multiple foes, which is great for building party gauge. I was chain attacking within seconds. But I guess that's forgivable if this is the playstyle they want to teach the player. Rush chain attack as soon as possible and abuse it to win. With that boss fight, the Tephra Cave dungeon is over. A bit of a strange one considering about a third is low level and was explored back in chapter 1, another third ended up being filled with side quests I've had to ignore for pacing, and the last third was spent running away from all enemies since Ryan was gone. The dungeon is also incredibly linear with hardly any secrets to find except for a blocked off area we only get to visit much later. The portion we already explored in chapter 1 was far more engaging. After the fight, Ryan is impressed that the Monado they had used on a lot of non-Mechon before they separated can in fact be used against non-Mechon. Nice to have a verbal cutscene confirmation that it canonically appears to work on all life on Bionis we've encountered so far, and that homes are the only thing it can't cut. I'm noting this down for future reference as it could come in handy. If I were to preempt an explanation for why it can't cut people but can cut anything else, I'd need that second possible name explanation mentioned earlier. The monadology interpretation of the name is based on the text Monadology from German philosopher Gottfried Leibniz, who attempted to explain the metaphysics of how the universe operates back in the early 1700s. The briefest summary of this idea is that the fundamental particle of the universe are monads. Each monad is unique and can't be divided further. Each monad can also be referred to as a soul, so you, as a human, has a singular particle that defines you as a being. That is your dominant monad. The rest of your body is of course comprised of countless other monads, which represents how our living bodies are entire ecosystems of smaller organisms which have their own souls, or monads. This idea that every living thing is an ecosystem of smaller things supposedly holds true forever, both as you zoom in on the individual cells of a person, and as you zoom out to behold entire societies, planets and galaxies. Ultimately, God himself is a manifestation of these ecosystems on the greatest scale, where all that exists is part of the ecosystem of God. He controls the universe like you might control your own body, but can't control its inhabitants any more than you can order your cells and bacteria around. Through the lens of monadology, the monado could either be an externalized extension of someone's soul, their monad, or it could possibly be a form of dominant monad with a degree of control of reality itself. Just like with agnostic interpretation, there's evidence to back up this one. If the monado is the sword of the Bionis, it stands to reason it might in fact be the giant god's soul. The philosophy of the universe as an ecosystem is even present in how Ryan and Shulk clunkily exposited that all life comes from the Bionis and must be returned to it. The Bionis might be akin to a god, but that doesn't mean he can control the bacteria which keep his body functioning, in this case the homs. This reading does make the idea of a true monado harder to explain, but it could potentially refer to the monado of the real god, or the universe itself. After all, both Bionis and Mechonis exist within the universe, meaning they don't encompass the universe. A greater force could still exist, and would you look at that, we looked back to Gnosticism. In either case, monadology has some decent potential reasonings for why the sword can't cut people. That text classifies beings into basic entelechies, souls, or entelechies with perception and memory, and finally rational souls. The first category would be extremely basic entities who can hardly be considered alive, or which are alive but are utterly incapable of thought. Stones, plants, etc. The second is for animals who do retain information and can perceive their surroundings, but that don't have higher levels of rational thought. In this case, it would likely include all monsters. Then, finally, we have humans. And theoretically other people too. If the Monado draws inspiration and mechanics from this source, that could explain why it's specifically people that are immune to it, while monsters and Mechon are vulnerable. So much we can draw from a simple choice of name. Shulk realizes what he realized in his very first fight using the Monado, that knowing future events allows him to avoid them. He very plainly states what is already abundantly clear, that the visions are a warning of future events if he does nothing, and that he can make other things happen by taking action. Or by manifesting a new power, I guess. And these next lines hurt.
You've got my vote, and if you really can do that, I think Fiora would have liked it too. Yeah.
Yeah. That's all Shulk has to say, and all the emotion we get from the on-the-nose reminder that Shulk saw a vision of Fiora dying and couldn't save her. He technically even saw it back at the lab, which he might also remember, but probably doesn't. Maybe we could get some emotion in here. Maybe Shulk regrets his helplessness back then. Maybe he could realize that Monado's shield could possibly have saved her if he had discovered it sooner. Maybe he could obsess harder about the Monado and how to unlock new art so that never happens again. Would he talk to Ryan about it? It seems like it might be more in character if he would keep it inside, but that would be a great opportunity to show how close Ryan and Shulk are by having Ryan catch on that something is wrong. There are countless ways that a talented writer could turn this into a really heartfelt scene that would endear these characters to the player. But we get...
Yeah.
I'm so frustrated with that response that I can barely bother trying to fix how Ryan just segued into bringing up Fiora out of nowhere. As clunky as that is, it would probably still be worth it if we got something out of it. Anything other than...
Yeah.
Followed by resuming gameplay. They even set it up earlier. When talking by the campfire, Shulk did show he felt bad he couldn't do anything, but then Ryan told him that it's not his fault because it's not like anything could have been done to change the future. Let's ignore Shulk already knew for a fact the future could be changed from literally the moment he picked up the sword during the attack. He was just shown again that he can actually change it. Why wouldn't you tie that into the scene so that there's at least some character development happening in this bloody bore of a chapter? Why are the cutscenes happening in a vacuum, barely connected to the scenes that surround them? After that scene, we unlocked some more build options related to the skill trees, and I suppose now is as good a time as any to bring it up in full. SP, or skill points, is another resource like XP and AP that you get from basically everything you do that you can use to empower your character. Each character starts with 3 skill trees, for lack of a better term, with 2 more being locked behind secret side quest chains later. These skill trees are probably the most basic interpretation of a skill tree I've ever seen. You pick one of these branches for each character, and now all SP that character gets will be funneled into that linear skill progression. The only choice here is the order you want to unlock them in, and the only challenge is to constantly check that you haven't capped a branch, since that means all incoming SP will be wasted. When selecting another branch, you don't swap skills out. You get to keep everything, so just like with arts, it's just a question of priority. It's pretty basic, but I suppose that's fine for many. What we just unlocked here, however, is where a little bit of depth is added to the system. You see, each skill has a funny shape, and now each party member has a branch for each other party member filled with empty, funny shape slots that are unlocked based on affinity level. Each level of affinity unlocks one shape. These shapes can be used to borrow skills that fit the slot from the relevant character. However, there's a catch. Each borrowed skill costs affinity coins, which are gained from defeating unique monsters for the first time or by leveling up. So you are still limited in how many skills you can borrow from other characters, and unless you do repeat New Game Plus runs, you are unable to fit every single slot with what you want. So you pick the few skills that you want, out of the few skills that fit, out of the few skills that are available for the few slots you have, if you can afford them. The main story tells me to move on, but I just cleared this cave of main story obstructions, so it's back to do a few more side quests first. Starting off with the 4 generic quests, there's something strange in the cave. Sure, there's a nameless soldier giving us generic quests, but there are other quests that are given by nameless characters too. Their writing is pretty basic, though I've seen regular quests that are worse. You also don't turn them in, implying they truly are just renamed generic quests. A nameless soldier next to the generic quest soldier wants us to kill some arachnos blocking the way ahead. It then auto-completes, revealing it was just a random monster quest after all. A nameless soldier in Tephra Cave wants us to find his buddy who went to check out the cylinder hangar but hasn't returned. Dude's just chilling there. He tells us not to return to his friend because he's always worrying about nothing, so I guess the nameless soldier dude may just end up thinking both his buddy and we are dead. Though we have to go back there for another quest later anyway, so I don't know. The nameless soldier in the hangar dropped a pendant his girlfriend gave him. It's somewhere in the caves and he wants us to find it. This one actually does require us to return to him though, making it less generic than the quest dialogue would imply. The same nameless soldier from the caves who wanted us to check in on his buddy also wants us to get some arachno silk for him so that he can sell it for a profit, since he got 6 kids to feed. This quest also auto-completes like a regular monster or collection quest, but the nameless quest giver has another quest for us, so we return anyway. The nameless soldier, father of 6, wants to give us something as thanks. He buried something outside the cave during his return trip from Colony 6, so we can dig it up and keep it once we reach the knee. I guess that we'll have to wait to retrieve it, there's a cutscene in the way. The fact I can't truly determine if these are generic or not says a lot. The generic quests do have dialogue with them, but it's just basic stuff like, monsters are a problem, please kill. Almost exactly like the quest we got to kill arachnos. Meanwhile, the one who worries about his body and has kids to feed feels like a normal NPC, but he was never given a name. Really, it just highlights how the level of quality doesn't always differ much between generic and non-generic quests, which says a lot. We head back into the colony to see what's left to do. Monica is in love with a guy named Eric who doesn't really care for her. She heard you can make anyone fall in love with you by giving them a Tephra drop, and she has absolutely no problem with the ethical implications of this. Shulk has a vision where we see that Eric is just planning to use her and dump her if she ever becomes inconvenient, so I guess the drop doesn't work long term. Additionally, this other guy Andreas is in love with Monica and would despair at her ending up with Eric. Afterwards, we can speak to Andreas and learn that he also has no issues with the unethical side of forcing someone to fall in love with you using a Tephra drop. He wants us to get it for him instead, so he can make Monica love him. Shulk has another vision, seeing Monica regret marrying Andreas, as she is deeply unhappy with her marriage. Here we got a very clear branch that would be hard for anyone to miss, and visions are used even better than in the previously mentioned quests. Visions are very attention-grabbing compared to the often dull dialogue of the quests, so I'm sure more players read this dialogue than for any of the non-vision quests. Since the vision here shows us 2 separate paths, every player should know what's at stake and that they have a choice ahead of them. The only way to miss the branch is if you don't pick up the other quest from Andreas, but the vision clearly shows you that he's involved in the quest. And he is also active at the same time and very close by. Additionally, by showing us the outcome of our actions, the choice becomes much harder to make. Do we prioritize Andreas' happiness or Monica's? Is it better to give Andreas a wife who doesn't love him, or give Monica a boyfriend who only pretends to like her? Maybe Monica could win Eric over given enough time, or maybe Andreas could have a shot after Eric dumps her. Neither path is particularly good, but there are many factors to consider for both and no right choice. In fact, unlike the 2 previous branched quests, this shows some of the downside of Shulk's visions. He's no longer just doing what he feels is right, but rather deciding which future is better. An interesting idea I hope to see explored further. But that's as far as the main story goes. Would have been neat to see some of these negative effects on Shulk. Ryan could have been his foil here, arguing for doing what's right instead of what will eventually probably have a better outcome. Oh, for fuck's sake! Give it to Andreas and things go as expected. However, if we speak to Eric afterwards, we learn that he really misses Monica now that she's gone. I let the most important girl of my entire life slip through my fingers. Sounds like maybe Monica didn't even need the Tephra drop. In due time, maybe Eric would realize he too had feelings for her. Giving the Tephra drop to Monica seems to be the better choice. At least this way, 2 people may get to be happy instead of just Andreas. Unfortunately, Looking at the affinity chart, we can see that Andreas is happier to have gained Monica than Eric is sad to have lost her, and the average happiness in the world increases the most if we force Monica into an unhappy marriage, so whatever. While we're in the military district anyway, Captain Emil Eater needs us to help with some monster eradication. No other squads are willing to take on the job, and as we know from the last quest, she only has one subordinate, and he keeps blowing off work. Nothing spectacular about the quest yet, but the chain is still ongoing. We kill the monsters and our platoon is getting quite renowned for completing this mission. Not that she takes all the glory, she tells everyone how we helped. She promises to remember how we helped her when she rises through the ranks of the Colony Defense Force. Captain Emil Eater has another mission for us. Kill 1 out of 2 tough monsters in Tephra Cave so she and her subordinate can take down the other. It's an odd branching quest that affects nothing. We kill one of the creatures, whichever we want, and return to Emil Eater, who is now one step closer to a promotion. And there the chain ends for now. Still nothing too interesting, though I guess it's nice to check in on her from time to time to see how she's doing. Then there are 2 more quests that we still can't complete. Nareen, a huge Shulk simp, had a massive fight with her best friend Paula about who is hotter between Shulk and Ryan. Shulk has a vision that this fight will end their friendship, so we gotta stop them. Nareen agrees to apologize if we can show her how good friends Ryan and Shulk are. Since 10-year-old girls have the supernatural ability to smell male bonding, she can tell that clearly Ryan and Shulk are not good enough friends yet, so we have to come back when our affinity is higher. Not yet. The affinity talk is coming next video, I just gotta bottle it all up until then. When Shulk and Ryan are sufficiently good friends, we need to prove it to Paula, who has higher standards and decides that Shulk and Ryan aren't good enough friends yet. Some cracks are starting to show in the affinity system, but I have to be patient and wait for all the pieces to fall into place. Finally, Cheryl's mourning her dead son and wants us to collect all of his possessions that he dropped on his way towards the Bionis head before dying. I won't question it. This quest will take a while, but we can find the first of his items in Tephra Cave for now. Is there anything else to cover here? Right, the pacing is already messed up, so let's do gem crafting, which requires me to explain gems first. Which requires me to explain equipment, so bear with me for a while. Characters can equip armor pieces to their head, torso, arms, legs and feet, and they can equip a single weapon of a type unique to that character. But without gems, there wouldn't be much depth to this system. Armor comes in light, medium and heavy armor classes, categories that are only used to determine who can use what. To equip heavy or medium armor, you need a skill, but thanks to skill links, everyone can eventually use anything if you pick those. Each armor piece has a physical defense, ether defense, and weight. The first 2 stats simply subtract damage taken from physical and ether attacks respectively, while each 1 point of weight is an effective -1 to agility. That translates to -1% hit rate and evasion rate, which is pretty bad. So, with so few factors, it's easy to find the best piece of equipment you have right now and hand it over to whoever you like the most. Because practically everyone will want to use the same gear once equipping it is an option. Weapons are a little more interesting, but even there most depth is missing without gems. They have a minimum and maximum damage value, as well as crit chance for a higher chance of extra damage. Some weapons also grant physical or ether defense or even a block rate. Those stats are mostly relevant for tanks, as you would prefer the rest of your party to simply not get hit to begin with, but they can certainly be useful depending on your party composition. Since no 2 characters share weapon type, you only need to figure out which weapon of each type is the best for the corresponding character, and this is often not too hard. Maybe you have to consider if you want a wider damage range with lower minimum attack and higher maximum attack, or if you would want a much smaller range that can't reach the same amount of damage. Maybe you have a weaker weapon with higher crit chance that you want to consider, but either way there isn't much to consider, and often stat differences are big enough that it's not even a choice. And that is finally where gems provide the only meaningful depth to this entire equipment system. Every weapon or armor piece might have gem slots. Weapons can have up to 3, while each armor piece has at most 1. Some equipment, poorly named unique items, have these gem slots already filled with gems that cannot be removed. There are 86 different gem effects of varying usefulness. Some, like boosting your base stats, are universally useful, while others are extremely specific, like giving you resistance against a specific debuff, or reducing the detection range from specifically aquatic monsters. So basically, a lot of them are either useless or incredibly niche. As a new player, good luck figuring out which is which, especially after you've used up the 10 gems you know are good on your other party members and the rest are much more mixed. You are given some gems from quests or Collectopedia, but by far the greatest method of acquiring them is through gem crafting, which requires ether crystals. These are either dropped by enemies or farmed from the slowly respawning ether deposits around the world. Each crystal has multiple effects on it, depending on source. This means that after a few hours of exploring and questing, you will have several dozen crystals with random effects flooding your inventory. So I guess it's good the inventory limit was raised in Definitive Edition, huh? Though, since crystal and gems don't share inventory with anything else, all my criticism in the first video still applies. There's still no reason to sell collectibles or monster drops. To actually craft a gem, you pick 2 or more ether crystals, pick 2 party members to participate in the crafting, one of whom is the shooter and the other the engineer. You will then watch as a random amount of turns are taken, with a randomly selected action taken each turn. All effects on ether crystals have a percentage associated with them, which combines if you use multiple crystals with the same effect, and you need it to hit at least 100% for a gem to be made. This is what the turns are for. The party members will either use a strong flame, which increases a single effect by between 3 and 11%, a medium flame that increases all effects between 1 and 6%, or a gentle flame which increases the cylinder gauge between 40 and 70%. After turns are up, crafting ends. Each gem effect that hit 100% or more is turned into a gem, while the rest are discarded. For each full cylinder gauge, you can save one effect at its current percentage and turn it into a cylinder, which is just a single effect crystal. Enjoying all that randomness? Well, this is where the fun begins. The gems you create have ranks. Each rank is a stronger version of the effect than the previous rank, so Agility up 2 will always be stronger than Agility up 1. The easiest way to get a higher rank gem is to use higher rank crystals, but they come from later parts of the game. If you instead want gems that are just a little bit stronger than what you're supposed to have right now, you can instead push an effect to 200% in order to create a gem that's a rank higher than the crystals and cylinders used. But even then, the effect values are randomized. So the weakest rank 2 gem is stronger than the strongest rank 1, but the exact value can vary a lot and is entirely random. If you want to cap it out at the highest value, you must reach 300%, which also creates a duplicate of that gem. So, what can we do to turn these crystals with multiple effects at low percentages into higher rank gems? Let's start from the other end. The best setup you can have for hitting 300% on one effect is to have 2 cylinders with a desired effect at 99%, meaning you start at 198, and both medium and strong flames will only increase the strength of this one effect. To accomplish that, we need to split the desired effects into cylinders and push their percentages up as high as we dare without letting them hit 100%. Step 1 is to use 2 crystals with different effects, set up your shooter and engineer for a focus on gentle flames, and hope we fill the cylinder gauge enough to keep all of these effects. After all, it can be hard to say with certainty which effects are bad enough to ignore, so let's try to keep them all. To be as safe as possible, use crystals with fewer effects. But at the same time, make sure you don't use crystals with the same effects in a single craft, since those could be turned into separate cylinders. Being economical with your cylinders keeps you from farming new crystals as often, so it's for the best. When you have turned all these effects into cylinders, you move to step 2. Basically, just keep doing the same thing. Use cylinders with different effects, try to increase their percentages as little as possible, and then turn them back into cylinders. I say you should increase it as little as possible because you want those numbers up with minimal risk of going over 100%. Sometimes it can't be helped though, since the entire system is so random. Finally, once you can no longer push up the percentages of your cylinders without going over 100%, you reach step 3. Combine 2 cylinders with high percentages and set your shooter and engineer up to focus on heavy flames. Then you pray. Or save scum if you have no life. So, how do you select party members to control all this randomness? Each turn the engineer selects a flame at random, but each engineer have weighted odds towards each flame. In this case, Shulk has a 50% chance for gentle flames and is good for steps 1 and 2, while Ryan has an 80% chance to choose strong flames, making him great for step 3. The shooter contributes with a special ability. Rhine increases effects by an additional 1 to 6% when a strong flame is used, which actually makes him really bad as shooter for the first steps in my strategy. Shulk on the other hand gets into a fever more easily and... right, another RNG layer I forgot. Every turn there's a 1% chance of entering a fever state, where you take 3 to 10 turns instead of the usual 1. Shulk increases this to a 2% chance. So, a random percent chance of a random amount of additional turns for random flames with random strength. Nothing frustrating here at all, especially not when you get a gem push past 100% due to a random fever close to the end. So, I said Rhine is really bad as a shooter for the first steps, yet I will continue to use him for quite a long time into this playthrough. Why? Well, that's because the random amount of turns is actually based on affinity. Increasing affinity is a slow process, but Rhine and Shulk have an advantage here due to how long they spend in the same party before you can replace either one of them. It's not a small difference in turns either. 2 characters with no affinity gets 3 to 5 turns, while it's 10 to 15 turns at capped affinity. There are of course specific pairs that are better for certain steps when everyone has enough affinity, but the strategy I outlined is more or less the dominant one that will carry you through to the end of the game. This system is just as tedious as it sounds. If you don't know for sure what gems you want or which ones are good, you may be compelled to spend all your crystals just in case. But that takes ages and you will lose every last bit of your sanity listening to this for dozens of hours.
Got it? Alrighty, there we go! Nice one! Alrighty, to me! Alright! Alrighty, there we go! Awesome! To you! There we go! Woo! Alrighty, there we go! Alright! To you! To me! Nice one! Alrighty, there we go! Woo! To you! There we go! Awesome! This is better than usual!
Once you go in with a strategy, there isn't even any decision making per gem. You pick which character setup you want and what you're planning to accomplish, and then you go through your inventory until done. If you want to spend less time on this, you need to learn which gems are good. You won't know that yet unless you've looked things up online instead of experimenting for yourself though. To tie it all together, what do these gems mean for equipment depth? Instead of only choosing which of the basic equipment stats matter to you, you also need to consider the amount of empty or pre-filled gem slots, as well as which gems are already slotted in or which gems you have available to fill in those slots. Generally, more gem slots will beat better base stats, especially for armor. While you are playing through the game, you will be at a shortage of the gems you would really want, so you will constantly juggle gems between characters and use half-functioning builds. That's probably the most interesting part of the game. At post-game, you can instead focus on getting a theory-crafted build for all your party members, farm gems for it, and then try the finished builds out to see how they work, which will most likely just reveal how few of the gems are actually great. Okay, now we can continue with the story. We head back into the caves, all the way to the boss arena, and turns out this is the only way to exit the cave, so Shulk and Rhine head out to the Bionis Knee. We get a cool panning shot showing off the lands above, Sword Valley and the frozen right arm. We don't see anything resembling another colony in these shots, but if Colony 6 is on the way to Sword Valley and the front line could be pulled back there, then it really must be on the frozen arm or near the stomach. Either way, it's far above where we are now. These panning shots are really cool, but it makes me wish the game had come out on more powerful hardware, as it's really hard for me to imagine the locations on the Bionis actually all taking place on this Titan. While Tephra Cave didn't feel very big, it apparently led all the way from the foot of the Bionis up to the knee, and now I suppose we're going to climb up the thigh, which seems to be tilted at a 40-degree angle. If the playable locations were all clearly visible as part of this greater model, it would help me, and possibly many others, get immersed in the physical space of this world, and help us actually believe we are traversing the entire Titan. Instead, I have to constantly struggle with how the landscape maps onto these shots and question why all the wildlife doesn't just slide off the leg. Shulk and Rhine behold the sight that is the Bionis, and then turn to the Mechonis, declaring it their enemy. Obligatory fist clenching shot, though I guess Shulk ain't that good at clenching. But oh no, a Mechon is spying on them. I guess they want the Monado after all. I mean, if they were just hunting people indiscriminately, there would be no reason to ever call back the assault on Colony 9. So Maleface better get demoted once his superiors finds out he let Shulk live. Wait, why is the Mechon drone flying up the thigh? The Mechonis is the other way. Oh, it's heading to another Faced Mechon to tell it about the Monado. This Faced Mechon is literally eating people, it seems. Wait, they actually do that? I thought it was a meme. Do the Mechon actually have parts that allow them to consume and digest homes? Or is this the only one that actually eats them and it's just mangling people in its machinery to imitate chewing? I don't even know anymore. Other Mechon don't even have faces or mouths to chew with. Wait, rewind. Did Ryan say he'd seen this view before? What do you mean, no matter how many times I see this, Ryan? Have you been through the forbidden eternally closed door in the cave of mandatory spider boss fights before? Why couldn't they give the script a second pass to get rid of these inconsistencies? Chapter 1 set up the characters and the events of Chapter 2, and I feel it did one of those things well. Chapter 2 showed the Mechon assault and kicked the plot into motion with a very understandable motive for our two bros to head out on, as well as a lot of curiosity regarding the Mechon. Chapter 3 leached away all of that momentum. It starts with them admitting they have hardly any clue where they are going, then they spend scenes in the cave which don't feel as efficient as they could be and awkwardly delve into backstory without any relevant ties to what's happening right now. Ultimately, it all just serves to inform us that the Monado can do what we saw it do in previous chapter, but that sometimes when people are about to die, the man inside the Monado can bail Shulk out. Just, not with Fiora. More mysterious elements are being added, but they are more confusing than anything. The vision back at the lab is a sensory bombardment the player may only remember fragments from, and they can try to puzzle it together. But they aren't really meant to. The mystery of the face Mechon has a lot of pieces laid out, so we can already make an educated guess that Metal Face was once a Hom, possibly even Mumkar specifically. But nameless mystery man on weird spooky dream location who talks about the future being Shulk's for the taking if he finds the true Monado, it just doesn't really fit with any of the pieces we have, so we likely won't retain it very well. It's hard to form a theory when there's no context, so even that doesn't give us much to engage with mentally right now. The next few chapters are facing an uphill climb because of how Chapter 3 squandered what it had been given. And also because the leg is sloped 40 degrees. After reaching the knee, the boys start by picking up that gift a soldier hid in the ground, which is just as basic of a quest reward as everything else is. Then, they walk up the suspiciously non-steep thigh of the Bionis towards Colony 6. I guess it is kinda sloped, but not by 40 degrees. Almost immediately, a collectible triggers a new type of vision. This will be a quest item later, so I better not sell it. Not that I would need to sell it, since inventory isn't an issue in Definitive Edition, and I barely see a need for money, but thanks for the heads up, I guess. They keep going and bump into a bright orange distraction. It's a portal to the Land of Challenge, added in Definitive Edition. It's a pocket dimension ruled by a Noppon who ascended thanks to endless training throughout space and time. There are challenges here where you go in with either a predetermined party or one you make yourself, and you have to defeat waves of enemies on a time limit. The faster you are, the better rewards you get. There are cosmetic sets you're given for getting S rank and Noppon stones you can spend on buying other rewards, but for now we only have a single challenge available as we only have Shulk and Ryan, so let's return later. Much later. Preferably let's forget this even exists until after I've beaten the game. Okay, now we finally move on. There are some random travelers with generic side quests. I assume they were heading to Colony 9, but changed their minds when they realized they would have to walk through a boss arena and a door which has been sealed shut for millennia. They likely came from Colony 6, since it's the only other one left, but they have no news for us, so there must not be much going on over there. A little further on and we get the huge Bethesda moment as the world opens up to us. This is the Bionis Leg, a massive open field with lots of varied wildlife. Despite its nature as a seemingly regular field, many of the features don't look like anything that would be naturally occurring in the real world. The region overview also shows some ruins that don't match modern home architecture, and huge overhanging cliffs that I wish we could reach.
Once again I reiterate, pretty much if you can see it, you can go to it.
Mountain is not just a backdrop, you can walk all the way to the top of that mountain.
Now shut up, you're liars both of you. The boys keep going and Ryan spots smoke in the distance, so they decide to head over. It's a buggy that's supposedly in very good condition, despite the clearly alarming smoke from the engine. Someone left it behind for absolutely unknown reasons. Maybe it's because of the smoking engine, but I'm no mechanic, so I'll just take Shulk's word for it that it's in great condition. Shulk asks what happened to the driver and reaches out towards the buggy, which prompts another vision. So, can he just summon these at will now? it would make sense if he could, at least subconsciously, since it warned him of Ryan and Fiora's deaths, but not about some scrimbler in Colony 6 about to fall down a flight of stairs. So, by worrying about the driver, he sees a vision of them then. Okay. A little boy is chased by monsters near some water, so we search around every puddle, starting with the one marked by the quest tracker, and we find him on the first try, lucky. Monsters are killed and we save the boy. This kid got the beautiful kind of scream that people would complain about for years on end if it was present in a better game. We head back to the very good condition buggy and Shulk repairs it. On top of being broken, it's also out of fuel. Then everyone introduces themselves to each other, which no one thought to do while Shulk fixed the very good condition buggy or on the way back to it. The kid is called Juju and offers Ryan and Shulk to come back to his camp, giving them far too good instructions on how to get there for a game with quest trackers on the minimap. Now, the question is, did we leave the buggy behind, or should I pretend we pushed it all the way back to camp, considering it's out of fuel? Oh, Juju just drove it back. Runs pretty well on an empty tank, I gotta say, or maybe they just couldn't afford to animate Shulk and Ryan pushing it from behind. That's a bit jank. Someone who I can only assume is Juju's sister comes to greet us, and Shulk immediately sees a vision of her death alongside the death of Juju, seemingly at the hands of that new-faced mechon. The woman, Sharla, shouts at Juju for leaving the camp, saying they aren't ready, but she also shows clear concern for him. Besides there simply being monsters about, I wonder why he isn't allowed to leave camp. What are they not ready for? She recognizes Ryan's weapon, which signifies him as being a surviving member of the defense force, but mistakes him for being from Colony 6. Back in the caves, Ryan noticed the armed and armored merchant corpses wore Colony 6 insignias, likely due to his military training, so since Charlotte doesn't pick up on something like this with Ryan, it means she's likely just a civilian. Worth noting is that neither the merchants nor Ryan actually have any such insignia on their model, but will simply have to just pretend, just like we pretended Shulk ate the sandwich or that they pushed the buggy. Even if Ryan is missing such an insignia, that too would be a tell he's unlikely a soldier who just returned from duty. Unfortunately, Ryan isn't from Colony 6 and can't answer any questions of the colony, nor if this Gadot person survived. They tell her they're from Colony 9 and Juju introduces them. Sharla is very grateful we saved her brother's life, but seems a little upset that her younger brother offered we could spend the night at the camp as a reward.
I told them they could rest here, with us.
Did you now?
She reluctantly accepts. Even this random nameless stranger outside the camp offered for us to rest here as thanks for saving Juju, so why is she upset about it? Sharla and Juju are from Colony 6, but it's been occupied by the Mechon, she says. So, let me just double check here. The Mechon took the territory of Colony 6 and established themselves as the ruling force. I guess it could technically be the correct term as long as they're holding down the territory, even if they kill every last one of the inhabitants, but I highly doubt it's the best word to use in this situation. We'll see the state it's in when we get there, but unless the Mechon are governing what's left of the colony, I'm gonna say Charlotte just likes using military words she doesn't know. So, while she's very likely a civilian, she may be influenced by this Gadot, who's likely a member of the defense force. She clearly just doesn't know much about military stuff beyond what she's heard in passing. The victory during the Battle of Sword Valley a year ago left Colony 6 with a false sense of security, Charlotte tells us, which led them to not even noticing the approaching Mechon. They ate people and burned buildings, so she and Juju did what they could to evacuate the children and elderly. So, why did the victory leave Colony 6 with a sense of security at all? The only reason they won was because of Dumban, who went back home to Colony 9. Sure, it's been repeated now that everyone thought Dumban had actually somehow killed all the Mechon, but there's no way people actually believe that. Ryan said himself the Mechon had a base in Sword Valley, meaning everyone clearly knows the Mechon are still around. So, Colony 6 has been located close to Sword Valley for over a year, where they have been able to keep an eye on the Mechon while they build or rebuild a base on the sword, while knowing full well that the only way for them to defeat the Mechon is in a colony on the other side of a cave with a mandatory arachnoboss and an eternally closed door that sometimes isn't eternally closed. Even if Dumban had lived in Colony 6, there's no way I'd believe they would feel safe, as Dumban, a year after resting in physical therapy, still can't even hold a spoon with his dominant hand. If there's even the slightest risk of Mechon still being around, then there should have been something akin to endless tryouts for people to wield the Monado in the hopes that someone could keep the Mechon at bay. Especially since 14 years of Dixon studying the Monado and at least 1 year for Shulk has only led them to hypothesize that it may have Monado arts. They're not sure though. If there truly are no signs of Mechon activity whatsoever, then there should be expeditions to the Mechonis, which would likely reveal quite quickly that there are in fact a bunch of Mechon there. So even giving the game the most charitable interpretation that everyone honestly believed Dunban killed every single Mechon in existence, and the base Ryan mentioned has been abandoned for a year, there's no way Colony 6 would just sit there on the front lines feeling good about themselves. It would be their top priority to ensure there is no massive existential risk to the entire colony lurking nearby, while they are 100% defenseless against it. The Colony 6 Defense Force are so inept that they are without a doubt fully responsible for the destruction of their home. And at this point, I wouldn't even be surprised if Charla was a member of them. They clearly lack any kind of training. To be a little bit fair to them, the Colony 9 Defense Force also didn't notice the Mechon until they were already being attacked. But it's slightly more defensible since they weren't on the front lines and also had the Monado. It's unreal just how dumb this entire plot premise is. Anyway, Charla gives Gatto and the Colonel Otharon credit for so many people from the colony still surviving. Turns out, Gatto was her fiancé, and she has hopes he's still alive and has managed to save a lot of people. Juju, upon hearing Shulk and Ryan are going to Colony 6 for some good old revenge, wants to come with us. Charla reprimands him yet again, telling him it's more important to help the survivors than it is to get revenge. Juju elaborates that it's not just revenge, but that the attack on Colony 9 means some Mechon must have left Colony 6, making them weaker and possibly vulnerable for a counterattack. They have an interesting conflict going on. Charla cares only about taking care of the survivors and not exposing the camp to any danger, while Juju wants to take action and retake their home and save more people. With that attitude, Juju would make a great party member, even if Charla absolutely has a point as well. What should have been the deciding factor here is whether or not Juju has anything to contribute to a fight against Mechon. If he has any skills he could actually use to help, then I'd say he should be allowed to go with us. If not, why does he even want to come? Is he planning to drive up in his buggy and just watch as Shulk and Ryan fights? We haven't seen him be capable of really anything in the short time we've known him, so ultimately what could have been an interesting conflict between these two characters ends up just being completely one-sided, since Juju comes off as useless, whining, and I think we all know where this is going. It's not exactly an original story beat for some useless rebellious kid to insist on helping, being told no, and then causing trouble by helping anyway. Shulk sees a rerun vision of them both dying, because Xenoblade 1 likes to repeat itself. I guess it actually uses some different shots for some reason, but it clearly depicts the same event. As he was zoning out, Ryan joined in on the fun of reprimanding Juju, which probably wasn't the best move, but Juju gives up and goes to make dinner. While Shulk is busy not telling anyone about their impending deaths, Charla tells Ryan he reminds her of her missing, possibly dead fiancé when he shouts at Juju. Okay. Turns out her fiancé has taken care of her since she was young. Okay. No suspicious implications there at all. And while she's always seen him as a brother, he was more of a father to Juju. Okay. So, let me get this straight. Gatto is old enough to be a father figure to your younger brother, he practically raised the two of you, and now is your fiancé, even though you see him as a brother. Was Charla groomed into having step-sibling roleplay with Gatto? She might be better off with him dead, to be honest. I mean, I'm pretty sure the story isn't trying to tell me that Gatto is a sexual predator, but the way Charla talks about him, let's just say, could have been worded differently at least. Even looking into outside information to try to salvage this, Charla is 21 and he's 26, which isn't that big of an age gap, but the younger Charla was when he started taking care of her and Juju, the weirder the whole situation gets. Charla was 13 when Gatto was 18, meaning a comparable situation would be if Ryan would adopt his simp Paula and get engaged with her the moment she turns 18. This is obviously not an issue for any moral reasons, as I don't care what fictional characters do to each other, but be it due to cultural differences or poor wording, it's unclear how the player is supposed to feel about this relationship. If the player interprets Gatto as a strong and reliable figure that Charla and Juju depend on, then he might believe the relationship is healthy and root for their reunion. If the player instead interprets Gato as a groomer manipulating what very possibly may have been an orphaned minor into becoming his bride once she came of age, then odds are he'll likely pray for Gato's demise. But the characters are not picking up on any red flags, and are consequently not asking for clarifications, so for now we're left with a somewhat unclear introduction to this character and relationship. Hell, it's possible they wanted it to be the hot kind of unhealthy or immoral relationship, but even then they should have leaned into that aspect further. I can't rule anything out for sure. Considering the romantic relationship dynamics in Xenogears, Groomer's step-sibling roleplay is entirely tame by comparison. What's that? 2 lengthy tangents in the same conversation? Please, Sharla, don't give me fuel for a third. Ryan, experiencing commitment issues about being a father due to the Gato comparison, quickly changes the topic by pointing out Shulk is just standing there, not telling anyone about his visions. The distraction ended up pointless, however, as Juju takes the car and leaves. Honestly, can't blame him after a revenge-driven stranger shouted at him for wanting revenge, only to have his sister go on about how the stranger shouts at him just like her fiancé used to. I'd bail too. Juju is heading to Colony 6 on his own because of reasons, and he's planning to do stuff when he gets there. Only when prompted does Shulk explain his vision and that Juju dies in a deep valley, completely leaving out the part about Sharla and mistakenly assuming that the hungry Mechon is Metalface from earlier. Then he and Ryan have to explain how his visions work to Sharla, who won't believe them, but she joins up anyway just in case Juju is truly in danger, and Shulk briefly considers telling her about her own death but decides not to. Sharla says Ryan is just like her fiancé again, and then they head out. I don't get it. What's with the constant comparisons to Gato? She hasn't even entertained the thought he may be dead yet, and still it looks like she's flirting with Ryan. I really don't get her. Even Ryan thinks it's weird she treats him like a substitute for her fiancé. Meanwhile, Shulk is thinking to himself how he could possibly save Sharla without entertaining the possibility of warning her of how she'll die so she can avoid it. And I guess Morado's shield won't work here either for whatever reason. Must not be a talent art, I guess. Sharla joins the party and directs us to the bridge Juju likely took to reach the colony. It was apparently built a long time ago when Colony 9 was founded, which gives us some insight into older Homs architecture. It also tells us that at least Colony 9 is young enough that the founding is still known by someone like Sharla. If so, if the founding of some colonies is still remembered by the Homs, they probably have records about it. And that means they know their own history. Then, the Magmel ship can't be from their founders, or they would be very much aware of it already. Okay. Does that dispel the idea they were founded by some greater empire, or is that just another faction from whoever crashed their ship? I really can't tell and I'm getting quite confused by the world building, so let's focus on it later. On the way to the bridge, Sharla confirms she has field experience as a medic. Well then. Colony 6 Defense Force is a joke, I guess. Meanwhile, Juju crashed his car again. He blames the barrier he crashed into, which stopped him from driving off the bridge and into the lake below. Since he clearly has no thoughts about his own well-being, he is undeterred and presses on to show everyone what he's capable of. Still no hint at what he's planning to do, but alright. Once Shulk and friends reach the broken buggy, Shulk reaches out to force another vision, showing the rough location of where Juju is about to be ambushed. And he has a gun. A big one. Not sure where that gun was when he was attacked by monsters before, but maybe he just stole it and can't use it? I mean, that's the only thing keeping him from qualifying as a party member in my eyes, so surely he absolutely can't aim. Which shows Juju using a gun, and he seems pretty good. So he can use that thing. That gives him a pretty good justification for wanting to join our party and leaving for Colony 6. Hell, considering Sharla's kid, he's probably even better than her in a fight. Oh, fuck off! Should've just let him join. The vision takes place by a large spiral-shaped stone pillar.
Juju! What is it? It's Juju!
Very eloquent, Shulk.
Is he okay?
Man, Shulk really has a way with words, huh? Even though this vision doesn't show much we didn't see before, he's not only shocked by it, but also insists a Mechon has taken Juju. Not that it will take him, it already has. Christ, this game's dialogue falls apart if you're actually listening to it. Ryan asks when, and Shulk admits to not knowing, but also randomly guessing they don't have much time. Okay. We didn't get that good of a look before, but now it's blatantly clear that this is not any deep valley like Shulk described it. But then again, Charla is also kinda wrong that there aren't any other deep valleys nearby, so basically, Shulk's description and Charlotte's false knowledge of the area should make it impossible to ever find Juju. They reach the spot Charla is sure Shulk meant, even though this wasn't at all the spot from his vision, and so they decide to look around nearby. Shulk is hyper-delusional and thinks they are in the right spot, but they are here, at the crossing between Mugwell Road and Windy Cave. Juju is over here at Spiral Valley. Quite far away. And the landmark in Shulk's vision is so distinct there's absolutely no way anyone could ever mistake it. Well, since Juju could be anywhere, better start looking. And if we happen to bump into a couple of hours of side quests as we look, then we can't just ignore them. It might be urgent. Besides, there's a bunch of quests as far back as Colony 9 that become available the moment Charla joins. The devs are practically telling me to let Juju die. The quests here on the leg don't really care too much if we have Charla, but we get almost all of them from her camp anyway, so no point in doing it before she joins. Besides, we don't want to miss out on getting affinity with her. The new quests are things like mending the relationship between Curryman and his daughter back in Colony 9, which is bizarre timing from the developers. Is now really the best time to go back? Just like in Tephra Cave, twice, I've had to slightly delay the side quests here because progressing through the area triggered these additional 2 cutscenes. Not a huge deal if you consider side quests to just be filler busy work, which this structure cements. It's hard enough to follow multiple stories with simple NPCs at once if you just accept all quests in bulk, but it gets even harder if you try to juggle it alongside the main quest. And yes, this is in fact a pattern for nearly every single zone going forward. We enter because of main story, get access to a ton of quests, many of which takes us past the halfway point of the zone. Going past that point triggers more main story, and only after that are we truly free to explore and quest. It's like it's designed to mess up with the flow and pacing of the story with endless distractions. So, after tricking Charla into joining the party under the false pretenses that we will save Juju, it's actually side quest time, which took me 5 real-life hours. Who knows how many in-game days they wasted. Even if fast travel would be canonically instant, it would be a lot. And those 5 hours also involved a lot of changing the time to wait for NPCs to be around, so rip Juju. Overall, this is a great example of how side quest pacing is bizarre. The player is given a large pile of quests that the character definitely don't have time to do, many of which require backtracking in ways that surely can't possibly be canon. It's not just that there are too many quests, but also that there's no point where the story slows down enough that I feel it's a good opportunity to do them all. And trust me, this whole Save Juju plotline isn't going to be over in just a few more minutes. It will be quite a bit before we can quest without his life being in danger. Of course, I'm still telling Charla we're looking for Juju nearby, so let's start by checking if he returned to camp. You never know. The refugee camp is running low on medicine for one of the elderly, so we need to bring some ingredients so they can make more. We do. That's the quest. Some Turkin stole clothes that the refugees had hung to dry, and we need to fetch them. The Turkin are using the clothes as bait to lure and kill Homs who want their clothes back. We go kill the Turkin and bring back the clothes. It makes me question just how intelligent Turkin are and how their society operates, as well as why their relationship with Homs just amount to trying to kill them. Maybe we'll learn more about it in the future. Simple monstrous races are absolutely not a flaw, but I like learning about the worlds I'm in. Old Man Ernest tells us about an endless ether deposit. Ryan doesn't believe him, but they go along with it anyway. Turns out it was a normal ether deposit, which summoned a bunch of monsters. He lied. We return, and he apologizes for his mistaken info. Ernest tells us of another endless ether deposit, for real this time. No mix-up of the location for sure. Same thing happened. This time he at least admits to lying, saying we're too trusting. Finally, Ernest wants us to put flowers on someone's grave, and this time he's definitely not lying. Charla seems to believe him. We go, and a Turkin appears out of nowhere to attack us. Same shit as usual, I guess. But no, rather than believing Ernest tried to get us killed again, this is assumed to be the Turkin that killed his friend. Somehow. Even though that's not the information we have. We kill the Turkin and return to Ernest. Turns out someone lied to him and his friend, telling them there were ether crystals there. They went there and found nothing, but on the way back they were jumped by a Turkin, and his friend was killed. He hasn't been able to trust anyone ever since. And for some reason that led to him trying to get us killed multiple times by lying in the same way that got his friend killed. What a guy! At least now he, apparently, has realized the error of his ways and won't lie anymore. I guess this quest chain at least constitutes a story, even if it's not a very interesting or sensible one. Better than the first two one-off quests, I guess. Also, does Ernest realize that Charla is the only one protecting their camp? Everyone else are children or elderly. We talked to the Noppon Satata, whose grandson Kiroki broke his friend Nikita's toy that had been a gift from Nikita's late parents. God, that's a lot of names. Satata wants to fix the toy. He needs some materials and we go get them. Satata fixes the toy and we hand it to Kiroki so that he can hand it over to Nikita as an apology. It would mean more coming from the friend who broke it instead of anyone else, and Satata's primary concern is to mend the relationship between his grandkid and his friend. Kiroki thanks us and gives it to his friend right away. Satata thanks us and we can assume it did the trick. Surprisingly heartfelt for a one-off quest, I like it. As an entirely unrelated follow-up quest, Satata tells us the refugees are trying to be self-sufficient, but a monster has settled in near their best fishing spot, which makes it hard for them to catch fish. We go kill the monster, but at least that's the fodder quests dealt with. Next is an interesting chain. Matryona wants to make a storybook for the Noppon boy Pama, who lost both parents in the attack. She can draw pictures, but isn't good at writing, so she wants us to convince Yuan to write for her. Unfortunately, Yuan has decided to never write again, but if we get him some materials for ink, he'll change his mind, because the items are apparently so hard to get, we will never be able to get them. Of course, we already had them, so he changes his mind immediately and agrees to help. Matryona is happy he agreed, though slightly upset he would put us in danger by asking us to collect materials we already had in our pockets. Yuan apologizes for putting us in danger and explains that he hasn't been able to write due to being distracted by the horrors of surviving the attack on Colony 6, something that Ryan accurately sums up as a bit of a pain. Yuan hid among the elderly and children and so ended up evacuated while others stood their ground to defend the colony. Anyway, his writing is getting better now and he just wants us to get some berries for Matryona's paints. We get the stuff and he makes the paints. He wants us to hand them over since he really can't face her right now. We turn around and hand it to her. She's feeling really good about working on the book with Yuan and wants us to thank him the next time we see him. He's right behind us, so we turn around and thank him. He's grateful for our help. Now, this is where things get interesting. Matryona is almost done with the book and wants us to take a look. It's about a river spirit that grants a wish to a sad boy called Pama. Shulk gets a vision that Pama will go look for this river spirit and drown. To change the story, she needs a lake drop, which makes a paint perfect for painting over things. Then, Shulk gets another vision about a frail woman who needs medicine in order to look after Pama. The old lady, Arda, is bedridden due to some illness which she needs medicine for. Without the medicine, her condition will only get worse, and she can already not look after Pama, so... What's really funny about this quest is how arbitrarily unfair it is. You can only do one. Either you give Arda the medicine she desperately needs, or you help Matoya edit her book. You can pick up both the medicine and the lake drop, but the moment you turn one in, the other path is locked off. The most reasonable thing to do is to give the old lady her medicine, but that quest has worse rewards. The real kicker is that doing the initial quest of fetching the lake drop blocks off 3 quests later in the game for some reason. Those quests also needs the lake drop, and I guess there's only one in the entire game, even though you can only grab it when either quest is active. Also, keep in mind that this second quest is somewhat missable. You get the first quest, which shows a vision of Arda, who now offers the second quest, but if we don't pick it up in time, we can just miss it and lose out on more quests later. It's a lot like the branching quest with the mind-controlling Tephra drop from earlier, except this time there are consequences for missing the other branch. Obviously, we get Arda her medicine, and she promises to keep Pama away from rivers. She also says Yuan and Matryona would make a lovely couple, so we inform Matryona she doesn't need to censor her book, and she wants us to hand the book to Pama, so we do. He's really happy and will have Arda read it to him. If we instead choose to censor the book, Matryona just finishes the repainting and asks us to hand it to Pama. He notably does not mention having Arda read it to him this time. A decent enough chain telling a simple enough story using the vision mechanic to give us a branching path. You can go brain dead mode and get the worst outcome, or you can make the obvious story decision which will greatly reward you later with more quests and a better affinity chart. There's some jank in how the decision is made for you, especially if you don't realize the paths are mutually exclusive, but compared to the rest of these quests, it certainly has my approval. Finishing the quests at the camp is a good opportunity to discuss the Gaur Plains as a region. We enter from the west to this large open area, beautiful to behold but not very fun to traverse over and over again. There were a few natural bridges going over a small and shallow river, and a couple of dead-end paths without much of interest. More notable than any of the geography here is series staple Rotbart, a level 81 unique monkey that is renowned for hunting down unsuspecting newcomers. Though, try as I might, I found it impossible to bait him into attacking me for a natural looking clip of the traditional Rotbart experience. He simply walks far too slowly with far too small cone of vision to actually pose a significant threat. It's a shame. A large walking threat could really liven up the place by being a dynamic obstacle for me to plan routes around. The most notable thing about this early section is the random quest that surprises us as we approach a waterfall. A girl is being attacked by wolves. We kill them and save the girl who was just taking a bath. At 5 AM. She thanks us and heads back to the camp. She's not a notable NPC and the quest was nothing memorable either, but it's our first instance of encountering quests in the wild without quest givers and without map indications. If they utilized these a lot, which unfortunately they won't, I could see exploration getting a lot more rewarding. Further east, at least the landmarks get a tiny bit more interesting. Turken headquarters to the north and the refugee camp to the south are dead ends. The former is a miniature dungeon, in the absolute loosest definition of the word, and was made for one quest and a single unique monster. The latter is a settlement with characters in quest we've already done, so at least there's something there. We start getting some verticality with Sky Stage and Villera Hill. Overall, the entire western half of this map is large, open and empty. It makes for beautiful vistas, but running through it is still tiresome as it is empty space separating you from where you want to be. At least it has this upbeat theme and its night variant which inspire exploration and travel. Going even further east, there's Ragwell Lake, which is filled with strange mushroom-like pillars that form highly elevated bridges between some areas. North of the lake is a secret path that leads to Daksha's shrine, which makes me ask a lot of questions about this place's history. The large guideposts dotting the plains, the sunken ruins and Row Oasis, the road leading to this shrine, and the shrine itself, all appear to share origin, but it's entirely unclear what that origin could be for now. They are nothing like the bridge, which is the only structure here we know was built by Homs, and it doesn't seem to match Magmill ruins nor the anti-air batteries of Colony 9 either. Besides, we've also seen no signs of any Homs religion, so even if it was built by them, who would the shrine be for? Rushing past the ruins takes us through a cave where we find a broken gun belonging to Cheryl's dead son, a quest item. Beyond that, our first secret area, Observation Platform, a landmark with a beautiful view of Ragwell Lake. Secret areas are just like regular landmarks, but generally offer a great view or something cool, and they also give far more XP, SP and AP than regular landmarks do. Can't exactly call them a secret when we have so many quests to visit them, with clear waymarks and optional dotted lines showing the way, but sure. Going back down to the bridge, after crossing it there's a fork in the road. Either we can take Mugwell Road to the upper level, or an incredibly long-winded and convoluted path through the windy cave, filled with high-level enemies we must sneak past, which eventually leads to us climbing up a sheer cliff to come up at another guidepost of unknown origin. This guidepost is close to this small camp called Traveller's Rest, where we can find a couple of Nopon with quests for us that I'll touch upon in a moment. This entire upper region is littered with holes in the ground, which will send you down below into the windy cave again, one of which even drops you into an otherwise inaccessible area, so that's some exploration for you. The central landmark of this upper section is Spiral Valley, a screw-shaped pillar sticking up from the windy cave, a landmark so distinct it would be impossible to mistake it for anything else on the map. Who would do that? And because we still haven't saved Juju, I have to avoid it like it's a European Christmas market, or else I'll trigger the cutscene. A secret passage to the north takes us through a long way leading to another beautiful secret area overlooking a waterfall. So, let's rewind a bit and look at some of these names. The big shrine we visited earlier was named after Daksha, a Hindu god in the real world. Considering even humans are renamed homes in this fantasy setting, it would seem unlikely to be a real-world connection, so perhaps it's more thematically relevant. Is there anything we can gather from the name? Well, Daksha is, according to the Rig Veda, a sacred Hindu text, a deity associated with priestly skills and dexterity. He's possibly the father of Aditi, the goddess of infinity, or sometimes her son. Yeah, honestly, the more I read up on him, the harder I find connecting it to the game. Most of these names likely just have no real meaning to them. Ragwell Lake is named after an angel, Gour Plains is named after an endangered bovine, this puddle is named after a letter of the Greek alphabet, and this stone monument is named after a tool for puncturing roofing slates. The only thing we know for sure about the shrine is that the primary inhabitant of it is the infamous jump scare Antol, named after a region of Germany, who prevents you from getting an item needed for a later quest. This waterfall is called Kashyapa Falls, meaning it's named after a Hindu sage that married 13 of Daksha's daughters, so maybe the ancient civilization that lived here was Hindu. Or maybe there's just no deeper meaning to any of these location names, and the devs ended up with a few Hindu names in the same place while just selecting what sounded cool. Considering how none of that civilization's guideposts fit the naming scheme, I'm leaning towards that. Besides, in-universe, it's far more likely that all of these locations were named by homes, considering there's been no mention of other civilizations inhabiting these regions. For the original names to have persisted, some awareness of the people who lived here would necessarily have been passed on, and there's no sign of that so far. So I'm just gonna stop looking for meaning in location names now. Or really the names in general, considering the numerous unique monsters are no better. Lots are named after demons, but that large Antol was named after a German province, and Rotbart the massive monkey is named after a pirate. Because reasons, I assume. So, the inspiration for all of these names was clearly drawn from the real world, and there seems to be no in-universe reason for them. At the same time, there also doesn't seem to be any real-world meaning to be gleaned from these names either. They could have named everything with a reasonable in-universe name that would flesh out the world and cultures that named them, or they could be named after real-world things that would shape how we think about the world and what the developers are trying to say about it. You know, just like with the Monado. They appear to have done neither, which is fine, but it's a bit of wasted potential. The names accomplish nothing instead of something, and should there be names with meaning in the future, I'm likely to miss them because I'm being trained to ignore it right now. So, the entire region is pretty underwhelming in nearly every single aspect. But it sure looks pretty, I guess. But I mentioned a small Noppon camp a while back, didn't I? Let's check out their questline. A Noppon named Gerugu lost his friends somewhere. He went out looking for food, but tends to get lost. We offer to help find him. We find Batu Batu, who didn't realize how long he had been gone. He apologizes and returns to Gerugu. Next up, Batu Batu wants some weird egg and mushroom to make a secret Noppon elixir as a special gift for someone. We get the goods, stealing the egg from a very high-level bird and the mushroom for a very high-level arachno. Some sneaking being required makes this quest more interesting than most collection quests, and when we return, Batu Batu realizes that we were the ones who helped him before, so he asks us to get stuff for our own gift. All because Batu Batu is a self-admitted racist who thinks all home look the same. Sadly, we don't get any secret Noppon elixir, just a middling gem, so I guess this is pretty definitive evidence that quest rewards aren't entirely canonical. Finally, Gerugu needs help finding Batu Batu again. This time he went out looking for a good present for us, and he has been gone a long time. Batu Batu supposedly went to fetch a flower from atop a huge waterfall, so that's where we go. Batu Batu didn't quite make it to the waterfall due to all the monsters, so he asks us to go fetch the flower for him. We find it and return to Traveler's Rest, where Batu Batu again realizes that we were the ones he wanted to thank. Next time he will tell Gerugu before wandering off, so he doesn't bother us further. Nothing particularly special, but it's kinda neat and funny. I would be happy if this was the baseline quality for quests in the game. But even after all these quests, Sharla still hasn't found Juju, so we convince her to check out Colony 9. After all, that's a huge valley too. Maybe that's what Shulk saw. And if we happen to get stuck side-questing again, that's really not our fault. Curryman Giorgio wants us to cheer up his daughter Paula. She believes her dad sent us instead of coming himself because she's not a good enough daughter, so she wants us to go kill some monsters. We return to Paula, and she's grateful. When we talk to Giorgio, he says we can hang out with her whenever we want. He then realizes he needs to spend more time with her instead of pawning her off on others. This is a direct follow-up to his previous quest where he's dying from exhaustion. Had we spoken to Paula instead, we would get another quest here. Then, Giorgio would tell us his customers have been complaining about his cooking since he got his home life in order, and he needs us to get him some better ingredients while he gets back in the mood for curry. Also, he can make enough money to spoil his daughter with dresses. Speaking of Paula, after all this time she finally admits that Shulk and Ryan are good friends. Good. But she also insists that women are obviously incapable of friendship. No comment. Thus we have to get 2 female party members to high affinity with each other. Then we can finally prove that it is indeed physically possible for her to stay friends with her bestie. Yeah, that's not gonna happen for quite a while. We don't really hang out with girls here. Jackson is unsure what to do with his life and wants us to help him find someone who will take him on as an apprentice. In one of the routes, we can talk to Giorgio to get Jackson a job helping out at the curry kitchen. But first, we gotta kill some lizards. The lizards are level 8 to 9 lizards from Tephra Cave. We literally can't get this until Sharla joins us, which is after Shulk and Ryan alone defeats a level 12 boss, so what's the deal with this trivial task? Whatever the design reasons, we return to Giorgio and he agrees to take Jackson on as an apprentice. We return to give him the good news and he's excited to work on new recipes for Giorgio. As a follow-up, Jackson wants some rare ingredients for this new recipe idea he has. We go fetch them from level 5 fish. So first we need to kill a level 12 boss and unlock Sharla before we can get the first quest, then kill level 8 lizards before we unlock this one, and now finally level 5 piranhax. But why? There are level 13 piranhaxes up at Bioni's leg. What's the point of side quests that tells us to do some completely trivial and menial task? I'm going off script for a moment because it turns out I'd completely gaslit myself about the Wii version. So, my script tells me to mention you couldn't even track the locations of enemies on the Wii or 3DS, even though I confidently claimed you could in my last video. So, I consulted my Wii footage, which by now I think is like nearly 2 years old because of how long I've been putting this video off. And yeah, I didn't spot any way to track anything. So I went back to the game to be sure, and yep, no tracking whatsoever, and no indication your selected target is needed for a quest. You do still see the name of your enemy and what map they are on in the quest description, but that's it. Xenoblade players got to enjoy swimming around every shore until they found the right fishes for this quest, and probably also enjoyed the building doubt during their Paisky as the drops are very rare. But yeah, we eventually bring the fish back to Jackson, and he immediately tries out his new recipe. Fade to black, and then the food's done. It tastes great, but takes 10 days to prepare, which means it's not suitable for the curry shop. So, while Jackson worries about Giorgio being mad at him, I laugh about an extra 10 days that Giorgio has been missing while we stood in this one spot and waited for Jackson to finish cooking. But let's rewind. The other option is to speak to Kenny Rowan, the artist, about Jackson being his apprentice. He doesn't mind looking after Jackson, but only if we do him a favor. Kill the same lizard Giorgio wanted dead, but for different reasons. Specifically so that it'll be safe for Jackson to go through Tephra Cave in the future if he ever wants to go to the knee to look at the sky. That's the favor he wants to call in, sure. Now that he's apprenticing for Kenny Rohan, Jackson needs our help. As an artist's apprentice, he needs to kill a bug monster on the other side of Tephra Cave that irritates his teacher when he paints. This is clearly the job for an artist. It's actually incredibly high level. It's level 24, so that's about as high as the chapter boss of the next chapter. Not sure why the difficulty is so different between the routes, but okay. The Poet route is far more interesting from a gameplay perspective, as well as having the better affinity shard outcome. But the Chef route at least had a reasonable throughline. Couldn't we have just killed the bug because its stinger's venom gland is an ingredient in making some ink or paint or whatever? Not, oh, I'm irritated by a singular insect on the other side of this mountain range, which also happens to be significantly more powerful than any mechon we've ever seen. Kill it for me so I can paint in peace. But now, we're finally done exploring the map, filling out Collectopedia and doing all the 30 plus side quests. It's finally time to move on. And by that I mean I have another 90 minutes of recorded gem crafting footage because I forgot to turn off my recording. So far, Chapter 4 has been about 50 minutes of main quests, 5 hours of side quests, and 90 minutes of gem crafting. And that's all thanks to me fucking up the pacing of the last chapter by doing all the quests and lots of gem crafting before leaving the cave. Otherwise it would have been even worse. But let's move on for real now. We finally reach the real spot where Juju has been standing patiently waiting with his gun, not knowing that this is absolutely not the way to Colony 6, and not even on the way there. Since Shulk didn't warn Sharla about it, things begin to play out just like in the vision. Although, if he hadn't seen the vision, they wouldn't have known where to look, and events would likely not have played out this way. Even if they suspected he was going to Colony 6 and found his buggy on the way, there's no reason they would suspect a strange detour to the Spiral Pillar. In fact, maybe Sharla wouldn't have realized Juju was in danger to begin with and stayed back, like she did with his previous drive. The future without Shulk's vision is that Juju would have died here on his own, but maybe the vision knew what would happen if Shulk saw Juju died, factored in Shulk's reaction, and thus showed that Sharla would be there to die as well. Almost as if his reaction was predetermined and wouldn't change. Or maybe I'm just reading into it too much and Sharla would have found her way here in time anyway. Again, as there is no other way for Sharla to survive, the Monado gains another power in order to bail her out: speed. But this time, the voice from the dream in Tephra Cave speaks to Shulk when he wonders if the power is enough to save her. Does this mean that it's that man who grants the Monado new powers? Is he watching over Shulk? Is it perhaps the will of the Monado itself? Small nitpick here, just because I find it funny. The cutscene shows Monado's speed affecting the whole party, but in-game it exclusively affects a single target. Likely because it would be broken to give the entire party such a high evasion rate. This is the inverse of Shield, which protects the whole party, while the cutscene showed it being single target only. Likely because Shield is so niche it would be nearly pointless if it only protected a single person. It's also not entirely clear why Monado's Shield wouldn't be enough here, other than canonizing that Shield only protects from talent arts and no other form of damage, as I joked before. Anime battle cutscene ensues, which shows a cool flashy battle where the three of them are largely fighting on their own against various tentacles, ending with them standing back to back as the boss fight starts for real. Mechon M71 is fought alongside three tentacles that are easy to take out so they can't use their spooky bite talent arts which lower max health. Once the M71 is at half health, it escapes to the upper platform. It now fights alone but attacks faster, has more health and gains 2 more attacks. It's still nothing particularly interesting. The boss fight ends and the party defeats the tentacular squid Mechon, saving the day. Juju realizes his mistake and apologizes, only to be slapped by Sharla. As dumb as that stunt was, I feel bad for him. Reen makes a dumb joke about changing the future, but where's that faced Mechon at? Oh, there he is! And he talks. He talks a bunch of shit. Apparently Metalface didn't just let us live, but actively ran away from Shulk. But why though? I mean, I got no clue why the Monado could cut him in the face to begin with, but I doubt Shulk could repeat that trick again. Is he really so cowardly? 1 wound is enough to make him flee. Was it also he who called off the entire attack then? Not a very scary villain, is he, if this new Mechon is making fun of him? Maybe if Metalface was more of an established character, we could tell if this mockery is something that aligns with reality, or just a bad attempt by Mr. Brownface here to make himself look tougher. We take on this mysterious face, but miss nearly every single attack while he keeps mocking us. He's much higher level than the previous boss, and we aren't meant to be able to win this. The fight ends the first time he uses the art Wild Crash, and we can't take him further down than half health, as unlikely as that would be. Although, I haven't told you about casual mode yet. When you die, the game will condescendingly ask enemy too strong and suggest you turn on casual mode. This doubles your damage done, halves damage taken, doubles party gauge gains, reduces spike damage by 90% and lets you resist debuff spikes half the time. Most importantly though, level disparities in the game are artificially inflated with a modifier to hit rate and block rate depending on the level difference. That's why I can't land a single hit on this mysterious face when he's 9 levels above me. But casual mode removes this modifier. This is what it looks like when a poorly optimized level 14 party on casual mode fights the same boss. He shouts, "I think a fly bit me," over and over again, as it's a taunting line every time we hit him for basically no damage. Since he's a phased Mechon, that's practically every single attack. However, no matter how badly he wants to use Wild Crash, it always triggers a vision, which means we can prevent it by keeping him toppled. Toppling him forever is trivial thanks to the absurd party gauge gain, and yeah, don't do casual mode. It's a crutch and will only help you for so long before a lack of gear, gems, builds and levels will still screw you over. Just learn the mechanics, do a few quests, okay, maybe do a lot of quests, make some gems, do a few more quests, and keep your characters as powered up as you can. You can still easily trivialize the game without going for 100% completion, but you definitely do need to engage with a lot of the side content and the game's mechanics in general. The Face picks up Juju, but Shulk fights him one-on-one while Ryan and Charlotte deal with ads. Shulk is beginning to question why the Monado doesn't work on the Faces, making it seem like his theory has regressed since back in Colony 9, where he deduced that it was due to their gamer LEDs. The team keeps trying flawed tactic after tactic, ignoring that they know full well they can't damage the Face unless they topple him first. This could have been a good opportunity to show that Shulk is analytical and intelligent by having him devise a plan to bypass the LEDs like he did with Metalface, but no, have him forget how it all works instead. The mysterious Face grows bored and slams his hammer down, sending Charlotte almost off the cliff while the rest are downed. The Face wins and is just about to deliver the final blow when it seems his batteries start running low. A better reason than for Metalface's retreat, even if it is awfully convenient timing, kind of as if the writers are desperately trying to bail Shulk out of yet another pickle. So the Mechon picks up Juju, flies away and tells Shulk to come see him at Colony 6 or else he'll eat Juju. So what the fuck are the stakes here? If a character risks dying, Shulk just gets a new superpower to save them without any effort. If they are about to lose a battle, something convenient comes up and his enemies simply reconsider the whole ordeal. At no point has the character succeeded due to their own skill or ingenuity, they are always just bailed out by the plot. Well, except for the time Fiora piloted a mech, but she's gone now and can no longer cause the plot to be driven by actions rather than happenstance. Well, at least the soundtrack here is a good choice. It's a track that played during the Mechon assault on Colony 9 and will play in many other instances of Mechon conflicts where they are portrayed as a big threat. So I don't know why Definitive Edition changed it to be silent, it's really strange. Charlotte climbs up again without any assistance, which makes me question the choice of letting her dangle, but whatever, small detail. It's time for one of the most popular chapters in the game. Meanwhile, all I can say for this one is that the pacing is a mess, but I'm starting to feel you get the message on that. Chapter 5 starts off with a flashback where Charlotte helpfully calls out Gado's name, so there's no question who this man she's talking to is. And he responds in kind by helpfully pointing out it's been a year since the Battle of Sword Valley. Truly, they were made for each other. Then, Othoran enters, which we know thanks to Charla, and for some reason he insists on referring to Charla by her rank, but not Gado. It's very odd. We get the twist reveal that Charla didn't choose to save people. She wanted to fight, but were given orders to evacuate people and take care of them. From what we can tell, this isn't due to a sense of duty towards the refugees, nor a belief that she can help them more as a medic than she can do on the front lines as a soldier. The only reason we've been given is her promise to Gado that she would watch over the refugees until he returned. It would have been really interesting to see hints of this inner conflict back when she was arguing with Juju. She feels the exact same as him and wants to fight the Mechon, but stays put to help the refugees. Would she argue that it's better to stay even though she doesn't believe it herself? Would she hold Juju to the promise that she made to Gado? Maybe the reason why we didn't see this conflict was simply because she's repressing it, because she doesn't want to admit how strongly she feels the same as her brother. Or maybe that's just me reaching for depth that's not actually present. There could be so much here, but I'm not seeing it in the acting, I'm not seeing it in the dialogue. There's a lot of potential here for something very compelling, but it's not utilized at all. At least not yet, but I guess we can hope it gets better, if you haven't given up yet. But let's follow this development now that we are aware that the story is trying to do something here. We could have a very interesting dynamic between her and Juju once they reunite, and if that's not what they're setting up here, then I wonder what this cutscene is even for. The flashback ends by turning into a nightmare as the mysterious face starts laughing and taunting her about eating Juju, and then Charla wakes up. There was some minor world building in that flashback that's worth pointing out though. Colony 6 does indeed have flying vehicles. We could see one back at the camp, but didn't know for sure if this was standard Colony 6 stuff or what the deal was with it. From what I can find, Colony 9 doesn't have any flying machines, so I wonder why they are exclusive to 6. Regardless of the reason, this could lend credence to the door was always closed possibility, since there's another way to trade with Colony 9, but that means there's no reason for the lamps or dead merchants to be down in the cave, so Tephra Cave remains dumb, and yeah, I'm sorry, I'll stop. Once Sharla wakes up, she decides to head out to save Juju alone, but Shulk and Ryan asks to come with her. In fact, they were going to leave her behind before Ryan realized Shulk's only heal is kind of awful on its own and that he'd rather have Sharla taking care of his wounds. We take 5 steps and then Sharla stops us for a brief monologue about being distraught about returning to Colony 6. It came out of nowhere, there was no reply, and it's over in about 12 seconds if you don't count the shot of them walking. The only justification for the scene is Sharla then telling us where to go. Time for another tirade of why a brief scene is bad? Yeah. There's no new information in her lines, so at most this is just repetition for those who weren't following along. We already know she wants to protect Colony 6, and we know she wants to be reunited with Garo, who might still be there fighting. Of course, she now also needs to save Juju. But at the same time, it must be hard to go back to her old home, considering everyone who must have died there. I'm not against getting her a moment for that inner conflict to sink in, but it's so superficial in how it draws attention to the turmoil existing without giving any dimensions to it. She gets a moment where she states that she lost herself for a minute because of the prospect of returning to Colony 6. She effectively just states that it's emotionally charged for her, but neither her lines nor her acting hints at what's going on. Is she sad she'll have to face the fate of everyone left behind? Or is she glad she's finally back on the front lines where she can help people? No clue. I guess you could interpret it however you like and pretend her character is complex, deep and well written. What's specifically going on inside her head could easily be hinted at here, and with just the tiniest bit, the player would have something to ponder on about the character. If the writers really struggled, they could have even had Ryan or Shulk respond, giving her a chance to elaborate further. And I can't overstate how little the voice acting helps.
It's been a while. And it's just... I never imagined I would go back to Colony 6 like this. I'm sorry. Lost myself for a minute.
The actors generally do a good job in the manually animated cutscene, but in these with automated animations, their delivery is often incredibly flat and emotionless. The music could help out a little more too, but that's secondary to better lines and acting. Ultimately, this is just like the conversation after the Arachno Queen. The writer brought up Fiora, checked that off their list, and moved on. Here, they acknowledge that this is hard for Sharla, and moved on without adding any depth to the characters involved. There is so much potential to work with for her. She could be compelling, and this scene could have given her depth and given her a chance to open up and bond with the other party members, but instead it's simply a scene that exists, repeats to the player that this is significant for Sharla, and then we move on. And as with all scenes of this quality, it wastes time. Someone still had to direct this cutscene with camera movements and selecting animations. Someone had to write these lines. Someone had to voice act. All of that costs money and takes time. If the writer had been more skilled or had spent a little more time on this, then maybe that money spent could have led to a scene that enhances the game. By the way, I want to clarify that when I shit on the voice acting, I'm talking exclusively about the English dub, which unfortunately is the standard experience for the English-speaking audience.
The enemy's second wave is approaching!
Just because the Monado showed you some future, that don't mean you could do anything about it.
So you're telling me Juju's in danger?
Come on, who put this barrier in the way?
Juju! What is it? It's Juju!
Shulk, is he okay? Tell me!
There's a mech on. It's taken Juju.
Juju! どうした? Juju が。
シュルク、ジュジュは無事なの？シュルク！
ジュジュが騎士兵に。
The original Japanese voice acting is phenomenal, in part because it was directed by the original developers instead of, I don't know, probably no one judging by the quality of some scenes. But also, it's amazing what you can get out of voice actors in a country where it's a respected profession instead of a nepotistic mess, and where the actors love what they do and respect the fans, instead of reading their lines like they're trying not to cringe before going online to start needless controversy, shit on fans, and act like they are the arbiter of canon concerning the characters they voice. After that waste of a scene, we head over to Colony 6 and get a nice panning shot of the area, and with it a small glimpse of the interconnectivity I was talking about when Shulk and Ryan first reached the knee. For just a few seconds, down there at the foot, we see what can only be Colony 9. While it's hard to recognize the thigh as the area we just came from, this is at least something small to make the world feel more connected, even if I struggle to see how Tephra Cave was vertical enough to get us all the way up to the knee. And I guess Colony 6 is on the Bionis Day. Now that we have an exact location of Colony 6, we can finally ask ourselves how the hell they were pulling the front line back here in the prologue. There doesn't seem to be any path from the injured midriff of the Bionis leading down here, so the only route I can intuit is all the way up the frozen arm and then climbing down the body. But they have flying vehicles, so extracting all the soldiers here is possible, I guess. Then comes the next question. What the hell does it mean to pull back the line to here? Were the Mechon flightless a year ago? Because if not, there wouldn't be much of a front line. They could steel ran some metal boys right on top of the colony, regardless of where the Homs put their so-called front line. But let's assume that 1 year ago Mechon had not discovered aviation. How is Colony 6 even a front line? For that to be the case, the colony would need to be a choke point in the only route the Mechon can take on their way to the target. So there's nothing worth defending beyond this point, and the world is small enough that this is the only possible route between Sword Valley and Colony 9. So, that's not great for the sense of scale in the world. Makes me wonder where the other 7+ colonies were located, since we've seen no sign of them yet. Were they all between Colony 6 and the Sword? Did Homs somehow set up a front line on the Sword with 7 ruined colonies between them and the next defensible location? I'm sure we'll learn more about them and the toll this war has taken on the Hom population as the game goes on. It'd be insane if this was the last chapter engaging with the idea that Mechon have nearly wiped out Hom as a species, as well as showing the toll the war is taking on the daily lives of the Hom. Anyway, the party stops here at the outskirts of Colony 6 to discuss their plan of action, but I immediately get hung up on the fact that it's been a month since the assault. There's absolutely no time frame for any of the events in the game. Chapter 1 and 2 all seem to happen in the same day, then after the assault it's just fade to black and we get back to Shulk after some unknown time had passed. Could be days, could be months. It's enough time for any damage to the colony to have been completely erased, but then again that was likely more due to asset limitations than anything else. Not even sure if I can factor that in when figuring out the canon here. Considering Dumban has his own unique perspective of death, Shulk is emotionally constipated, and Ryan never really seemed to be friends with Fiora anyway, I really can't tell how long it would take for the three of them to compose themselves after her passing. But even after they set out, there's a single scene in Tephra Cave of Ryan and Shulk napping, but that was after digging graves in solid stone, not because it was night. And it was also interrupted partway through anyway, so Shulk could have slept for 5 minutes or 5 hours. They also went to the refugee camp in order to rest there, but Juju left during the conversation, so he didn't get that far. Sharla fainted and was out for 4 hours following the fight with the new face, but time isn't actually changed for that cutscene and the time of day is the same as when you lose to Bronze Face, so we can't even be 100% certain that 24 hours have passed since the very start of the game. Well, except for the 5 days I waited around for Jackson to cook in that one side quest. Normally, this isn't really an issue in games, but it does mean that we have no context for what it means that Colony 6 was attacked a month ago. Were they attacked at the same time as Colony 9, meaning it's been a month of mourning and travel since Fiora's death? Or were they attacked before but didn't manage to warn Colony 9 at all? Actually planning out the timeline here can lead to story opportunities, like perhaps introducing the idea of just how organized the Mechon must be if the assaults were carried out at the exact same time. If the timing was different, maybe there could be conflict between the colonies due to Colony 6 not warning 9. Either resentment from 9, regret from 6, or perhaps even resentment from 6 if 9 were to blame them for the attack. Huge space to explore, even if it's just in the background or relegated to side quests. Although, the bigger elephant in the room is that Sharla was asked to guard the refugees, rather than, I don't know, go fetch the Mechon-slaying hero from Colony 9? Or even just fetch the Monado. While I definitely believe that's what should have happened, it would end up changing the story of these chapters significantly and it would likely have plenty of ripple effects going forward, but I'll explore the idea later. What were we talking about? Oh yeah, assault tactics. Instead of a frontal assault on Colony 6, which seemed empty from above, we're going to sneak in through the mines below. The ether mines are older than the colony itself, and in fact the colony was established here because of the proximity to the mines. Who carved out these mines, I wonder? Even if the hypothetical empire I mentioned in my last video does exist, they surely couldn't be responsible for the mines, since the first home settlers here chose this place because the mines already existed. So someone built and abandoned the mines before home settled. Curious. Apparently, the tunnel network that makes up the mines is so complicated, Charlie is confident the Mechon can't have figured it out, despite having a full month to do so. I wonder how we'll be able to navigate these mines if they truly are as complicated as she says. But before entering, there are two Noppon merchants named Noppon Merchant and Daza just hanging out by the locked Colony 6 gates. Seems the Mechon aren't a threat to them for some reason. Daza here lost his merchant license to some hoxes and needs us to get it back. We get it back for him. Then, Daza wants us to make the area safe so monsters don't steal his license again. We kill them. Weird he's more worried about monsters than Mechon. Nothing of value with these quests so far. Finally, Daza needs us to send a letter to Gerugu, one of the Noppon at Traveler's Rest on Bioni's leg. We deliver the letter and get a reply to return to Daza. We return with a reply. It seems Daza wanted Gerugu to investigate some red thing, but Gerugu's findings were inconclusive. Strange. We get to keep the top secret data that Gerugu found though. Not sure why, but I'm sure it will make sense in time. This could get interesting depending on how they follow up. But let's continue into the mines that everyone loves so much.
The Ether Mine is easily one of the worst areas in the game, and I doubt anyone's ever going to argue with you on that.
Sounds like it will be a lovely dungeon. Immediately after entering the cave, we encounter these two Noppon merchants called Noppon Merchant and Noppon Merchant. Judging by Charlotte's lack of reaction, they don't appear to be survivors from Colony 6, but here they are nonetheless. They too clearly feel safe enough to set up shop this close to the entrance of the mines. If we leave the merchants, we immediately spot Mechon walking around, so the Noppon were clearly spared by the Mechon without a doubt. Suspicious little buggers are what they are. Charlie gives in to despair right away at the sight of Mechon, but Ryan makes her keep it together. As she said, there's no way the Mechon could have figured out the entire tunnel network. So far, while the mine at least isn't linear, it's hard to see how it would take months to map out. Very classic level design problem, where you still need the area to be reasonable to play through, even if it's supposed to be a massive maze. Generally, the best approach is to give the appearance of the area being much larger than what we get to explore, possibly by blocking off passageways with closed doors, cave-ins or the likes. An open area showing a bunch of inaccessible routes can also help a lot here, but that's harder to do with a cave. The first half of the area isn't hard at all to traverse, especially thanks to the minimap, but also because Noppon Merchant told us the glow moss on the wall leads our way to the quest objective. Further in, Charla hears a shot from an ether rifle and rushes ahead. She's sure it must be Gatto, but unfortunately it's just Otharon. He's alone and would surely be dead by now if we hadn't saved him from the 4 Mechon he was fighting. How incredibly lucky for him. Again, he's just calling Charla by her title for some reason, maybe because we'd forget she's allegedly a trained soldier if we weren't repeatedly told. After the fight, we head back to a safer location where we catch each other up to speed. Othard is familiar with the bronze-faced Mechon, it seems. As for Gatto, he's gone. Him and Otharon planned a surprise attack to free all of Colony 6, but it failed and Otharon fell asleep. When he woke up, Gatto was missing, leaving only the gun behind. How incredibly lucky that the merciless Mechon left Otharon alone when eating or abducting Gatto. And you know the rules by now, no body means no death. At least Gatto has higher odds of survival than any of the previous characters have applied this rule to. Otharon agrees, insisting Gatto must be alive, though it's kind of a dick move to start by saying he's gone if you're so confident he's still out there somewhere. He's also sure Juju is still alive, because Mechon tend not to kill Homs right away for some reason. Besides, Bronzeface couldn't use him as bait if he ate him immediately, and he seemed eager to fight us again. Otharon saying they don't kill Homs right away should mean that the eating truly does just mean kidnapping, unless it's just plain wrong. Of course, Bronzeface being the exception, because he's just a very hungry boy. Otharon notes the Shulk's sword and recognizes that it once belonged to Damban. Honestly, it's kind of embarrassing that Charla didn't recognize it. She should have at least heard stories, but what can I expect from her, honestly? Otharon knows what the sword is capable of and asked for Shulk's help as they need it at full power to fight the Mechon. Their target, the Central Pit, where all kidnapped Homs are taken. Good use of Rage Darkness of the Heart again, as the loss turns Otharn towards vengeance and the scene ends while still in the early part before it moves towards action. Just as they are about to move out, it's vision time. Otharn fucking dies. Shulk reacts audibly, so Ryan takes notice and asks what's up. Shulk pretends it's nothing and yet again refuses to divulge potentially life-saving information. Not even 2 minutes later, we repeat parts of the vision, because Xenoblade 1 likes to repeat itself. This time Shulk asks what it can mean, as Otharn's final words are, "Gato, Juju, this is for you." Does it mean Juju is going to die too? He's still not sure how his visions work, and so he wonders if Otharn is going to die if they keep going. Kinda just treading water with the visions at the moment, but I'm willing to see where this is going, I guess. Without telling anyone about the visions, he tries to convince everyone to not go on with the attack, but is told they don't have time to wait. Maybe some kind of a reason for a delay could help convince them, not just saying, maybe we shouldn't. Otharn is pissed off by his suggestion that they should just wait and see before rushing in, as he's been observing the Mechon for a full month. In fact, he's so pissed off, he runs off to deal with the Mechon alone. Good job, Shulk. Fortunately, Ron catches on and realizes Shulk has been keeping quiet about his visions again. Shulk's description of the vision...
I saw an underground ether river. And a Tharon.
Yeah, really helpful, Shulk. Then there's this nonsensical exchange.
You know what? That sword lets you see the future. All that power, and you still keep getting it wrong.
Better to use my brain than my fists.
Shulk, I may rush in head first, but at least my head's useful for something.
Okay, I get the idea.
I ain't done yet. You're useless on your own, Shulk. That's why we're here.
But I can't obsess over every instance of characters not speaking like normal people, so let's just push forward. The important part is this.
Next time you have a vision, you tell us. We bear the burden together as a team. You have a vision you don't like, we'll change the future together. Got it?
And Shulk agrees. If he keeps it a secret again, I'm going to fucking lose it. Though this really begs the question, why was he still keeping these things to himself anyway? Ryan is absolutely right to call Shulk out, but he lets him off way too easily. Shulk first changed the future back in Colony 9, but has since then insisted on keeping all the visions to himself despite this. It's not exactly a small thing to keep secret. If he was invested in changing the future, why not use everything at his disposal to do so? Or at least confide in Ryan, his best friend. This is a situation that's ripe with potential tension and drama, yet this is the best they can muster over and over again. Why not focus on the desperation of trying to change the future despite there being no time to plan ahead? Why not highlight the anxiety of not knowing the alternative consequences his actions might have? Why not try to mention the visions to Otharn so that they can at least devise some kind of a plan, assuming he's willing to believe them? Nope. Only Shulk keeping visions secret and wondering if he can change the future. Again. On a more positive note, Sharla is coming around to believing in Shulk and his visions, so that's nice. On another positive note, the track Regret is being used pretty well so far. In general, it seems to accompany situations where characters are thinking back to tragic events, wishing they could have done something differently. We heard it once back when Charlotte talked about what happened to Colony 6, once more during her flashback dream with Gato, and now here. The first time it was used, it's not particularly precise with what the regret refers to, but after it plays again as she promises Gato to protect the refugees, we can tell that it's meant to symbolize Charlotte's regret for leaving the front lines instead of staying to protect those she cares about. It is an interesting choice that it plays now when Shulk is trying to prevent Otharn's death, but it likely signals that Otharn struggles with the same survivor's guilt that affects Sharla. Either that or it's pre-gret for Shulk hoping he can do something different to change the future. The music is unironically doing more heavy lifting than the writing now. Damn. The group descends deeper and deeper into the mines, and I'm starting to feel like Sharla was lying about the tunnel network being too vast to explore in a month. There's a brief labyrinthine section, sure, but that's it really. And now we are past that, and it's just time to descend to the central pit by passing by this massive drill, I guess? I don't quite know what it is, to be honest, but it looks very out of place and not really like anything I can imagine the Hom having built. I'd say it looks Mechon constructed too, but then I'd expect Sharla or anyone to point it out. The central pit and this drill lies just above an ether river, where the vision said Otharn would die. We still know very little of Ether in this game, but considering Ether attacks still deal half damage to Mechon, we can assume that Ether in such high quantities and concentration should be pretty dangerous even to a face. Falling into the river might thus be immediately fatal to a Hom and Mechon alike, so we have a decent grasp on the stakes. The descent to the bottom of the pit is largely linear. There are some choices of running where there are enemies or where the sweeping, slow-moving fan blades might sweep you off. There are some dead ends with crystals, and there's some minor gimmick towards the end where you have to get on the rotating blades, fight some Mechon, then get on another blade. Not particularly interesting to traverse. I'd call it a step up from Tephra Cave's linear design, but then it immediately loses all that goodwill by wasting my time with its slow rotation. Eventually we reach this diagonal elevator going to the boss arena. The elevator reaches the bottom, but there are no Homs there, only some black oil stains on the ground. Sharla looks at these oil stains and panics, insisting they are blood. Wait, Dunban coughed up black stuff too. Is Fiora the only Homs with red blood in this universe? It's really weird they would censor all other blood but keep Fiora's the way it is. What's even stranger is that Dunban coughing blood was changed to black in Definitive Edition, but this scene always had black blood. H ratings make no sense to me, though I guess this is neither the worst blood censorship in Xeno nor even in Xenoblade. Whatever the reason, we'll just have to accept that all these black stains are supposed to be blood, likely from Bronzeface having the munchies while waiting. Thanks Otharon, so much for watching these guys for a full month while planning your rescue. Bronzeface shows up, and in case the player downloaded a save file for his emulator and didn't play anything before this point, Ryan and Shulk helpfully explains that this face Mechon is indeed the face Mechon from 90 minutes ago who took Juju and who we are specifically here to fight. Thanks gang, the plot was a little too difficult for me to follow, but now I'm on board. Juju is safe, kept crucified in a 0G energy prism, which I guess the Mechon just have now. Bronzeface confirms he ate all the home captives, and he tells us his name is Zord. Or at least others call him Zord, but he doesn't remember his name. So, who calls him Zord though? Other Mechon? He's the only one we've seen talk, but I guess they have some way to communicate. There might be others like him. It's certainly strange, but I'll put a pin in this for now and go digging into it later. Sharla has a mental breakdown as everyone she knows is dead and turns fully to Team Shulk, vowing to kill every last one of them. Let's go Team Genocide! There's some battle cutscene where Shulk disproves my previous suggestion that it's only in the automated animation cutscenes where line delivery is flat.
We are Homs, and we won't just stand here waiting to be eaten.
After Zord taunts Shulk that the Monado can't hurt him, Shulk confirms for a third time that the Monado indeed does nothing against Faced Mechon, yet he's still surprised. Meanwhile, Zord is still belittling Metalface as a taunt, so I guess we really aren't meant to take Metalface seriously, even though he's probably gonna be a boss later on. Odd choice. Boss fight. We can't damage Zord, and we can only inflict break during a chain attack, which means we need party gauge. Thus, our strategy is to just keep killing the endlessly spawning ads until we can topple lock Zord into oblivion. Trying to attack Zord himself otherwise will just lead to him shouting, "I think a fly bit me," over and over again. Unfortunately, his minions spawn pretty slowly, so you'll still hear that line a lot. As long as you play as Shulk, it really isn't a very challenging boss fight. Visions will warn you of any art that might actually kill someone, and between Shulk and Sharla you'll be able to prevent that. So you just fight smaller enemies until your party gauge is full, topple the boss for a few seconds of vulnerability, and hope you can inflict some good damage while he's down. Even though every boss fight so far has technically been different, my engagement with them is equally low and they are starting to blend together. Sadly, that will become a franchise trend, but we're not there yet. Now, why do I insist on using Shulk for the boss fight? Well, visions trigger only when an art would leave the target with 15% or less HP, except for talent arts which always trigger them. A lot of the time, Monado arts are the best way to counter these arts. If you play as Shulk, you can just use them. But if you're playing as someone else, you would instead have to warn Shulk. Warning a party member takes 1 bar of party gauge, but lets you use one of that party member's arts. So either you play as Shulk and protect the party for free, or play as someone else and significantly slow down the rate at which you unlock chain attacks. Not a fun choice if you're fighting a boss that must be chain attacked in order for any damage to be dealt. Eventually, the fight is interrupted by a cutscene. Otharon found a de-weaponized mobile artillery here and uses it to keep Zord occupied. Realizing things are getting similar to his vision, Shulk gets a flashback to Ryan saying they would change the future together. So he decides to change the future alone by hijacking that crane over there without letting anyone know about his plan. O'Thorn punches something sensitive in the machinery and the ground beneath Sword gives way. O'Thorn ends up having to push to get him into the river, which sends them both falling. Shulk manages to save O'Thorn, or so it seems, but Sword is insistent and tries to pull O'Thorn down. With one shot, he gets Sword off him, but stumbles and falls anyway. The vision happens almost exactly as we saw it, except he now only calls out Gatto's name, which is kinda weird, because I don't see how any information from Shulk's vision did anything to save Juju. If anything, it was O'Thorn who distracted Sword so Ryan and Charlotte could save Juju. I don't see how Shulk affected that at all. So why is the vision different other than simply baiting us? Besides, we saw earlier that visions will take Shulk's reactions into account, so why are things different here? Whatever the reason, Ryan jumps after O'Thorn and manages to hold on to the crane, saving O'Thorn's life. Sorrow plays here yet again, as Shulk believed O'Thorn was dead for a moment, but it fades out as soon as he's been saved. Good track and worth 3 for 3 with it being used well in association with death and loss. O'Thorn thanks Shulk for saving his life, but asks if Shulk can see anything about Gatto or the others. Shulk just shakes his head, so he doesn't seem to have a clear grasp on the subconscious summoning of visions yet. Charla is given Gatto's old rifle, which will likely replace in a few more hours of gameplay. There's a quick exchange between Charla and Ryan that can technically be considered bonding, voiced with what can technically be considered voice acting.
We'll know that when we get on it.
You make me laugh.
Well, I'm right, ain't I?
You're absolutely right.
Then we leave to take the oversized diagonal freight elevator up to the surface. The elevator works and we get another heartfelt exchange between Ryan and Charla.
You see? What did I say?
We're all impressed.
We head up and wait, why is my fight or flight instinct kicking in?
Tell me, for whom do you fight? How very glib.
Turns out, Zord survived the Ether River, though he looks pretty beat up. His armor looks like it's been dipped in acid, so at least he took some believable damage from his quick dip. The Monado as well as Enchant deals full damage to him now, likely as the LEDs went out with his armor, so that's definitely what made him count as Homs, a custom gamer rig. The boss fight was a tiresome joke the first time and now it's just a joke. Rewind and see if you can spot a single mechanic in the footage of the full boss fight. I'm 2 levels below him and yet I won in 90 seconds without the boss using a single art and only using 10 or so auto attacks. Maybe if I was even further underleveled, or if I neglected my arts, skills and equipment more, I could have seen any of the 7 arts he supposedly has, but if you actually engage with the game mechanics, there really is no challenge to this boss fight. Though even then, looking through his arts, there are just 4 area attacks and 3 self buffs, none of which would really change how you play. Just heal through any damage and try to keep him toppled if you really fear his attacks. Sword is killed, with Charla getting the finishing blow on him. At this point he's so weakened that a single shot is enough to amputate his limbs, so Charla of course takes out the limbs one at a time with literally 1 frame per shot. Rage Darkness of the Heart playing makes some sense here, though being stuck in the first half while she's getting her vengeance is a little bit strange. Is it supposed to be sad and somber? Sword has some final words to share.
Got to hand it to you. You beat me without even releasing the true power of the Monado.
What does Sword mean by this?
What do you know about the Monado?
Yeah, Shulk, what the fuck does he know about the Monado? Oh, how I wish I could discuss this right now, but I would have to skip ahead to practically the end of the game in order to establish everything that makes this exchange so weird, so I'll have to put a pin in this one too and come back to it in half a day of video runtime or something. You get away this time, Sword, but don't think I've forgotten you. Like the rest of the cast will. He says something about when I became what you see now, which sounds like a definite win for the converted Homs theory. Rather than answering any of Shulk's questions, he jumps down the elevator shaft to spare the party from the blast of his explosion, which I guess may have killed them. I don't know, Ryan shouts for Shulk to get back from the blast, but Shulk ignores him and it's fine anyway. And then they just fade to black and cut to the party getting out before the entire mine explodes. I believe we are supposed to see Zord as sympathetic towards the end, and that his death now is the first spark to drive them to find answers instead of just killing indiscriminately. This is due to how Rage Darkness of the Heart transitions into its call to action section, which play around the time Zord half reveals incriminating information. We will see if this spark of curiosity is consciously acknowledged or if it remains in their subconscious, if even that. The group escapes and Juju apologizes yet again. "Well, that was a nice kill, but we really want to kill that Metal Face guy," says Shulk, summoning the plot. "It's Metal Face! And he can talk now! And he has a bunch of mass-produced bronze faces too." Metal Face is trying to get some of his dignity back after his pathetic retreat from Colony 9 and a lot of trash-talking from Zord by shit-talking Zord, who faced us alone, while Metal Face has to bring an entire army. Yeah, this dude is kinda pathetic to be honest. Though it's a good call from Monolith to back him up with a lot more faced mechons to make him menacing, considering we already beat him once. Had it only been him, we'd easily be able to beat him by keeping him toppled, although I'm not entirely sure if the cutscenes would allow us that win. This way, the fight is clearly unwinnable no matter if you follow game logic, cutscene logic, or simply don't find Metal Face threatening at this point. After Ryan points out that Metal Face can talk now when he couldn't before, the writers casually hand-wave away his previous inability to talk as if it's not even the slightest bit odd, and instead Metal Face starts mocking Shulk about how fun it was to kill Fiora. Shulk clearly needs a fourth reminder that the Monado doesn't work against Metcon faces! And he is so lucky Metal Face only wants to toy with him for now. Metal Face even tells him blankly that the Monado didn't work back then and doesn't work now, kinda forgetting about that time he got stabbed through the face by the Monado, which scared him enough to run away and develop speech. But I agree, the Monado absolutely shouldn't have worked there based on what we know, and obviously doesn't work now. But whatever. We now have two instances of superficial damage to the outermost layer of the armor plating causing the Monado to suddenly work fine. I'm even being charitable enough to ignore that the Monado shouldn't work just because a face is toppled, which I reckon is entirely so that Shulk doesn't drag the team down during face mech on boss fights. But what do I know? Maybe Fiora only survived the hits from the Monado because she was standing up. Metal Face goes in for a killing blow but stops mid-swing as an ether bullet hits the ground in front of him and explodes into a small firework. It's Dixon! And he unleashes Dumban, who proves he doesn't need the Monado to unleash his anime powers, and proceeds to run down a wall and one-shot two Mechon with a katana in his offhand. Not quite as flashy as before, but I guess at least he proved Shulk monumentally wrong regarding the Monado being
the only sword that's effective against the Mechon armor.
How did these two somehow get past the unpassable gates blocking entry to Colony 6 and thus end up ahead of us?
Well, you got me. By all accounts, it doesn't make sense.
God, I love that movie. Dixon and Dumban joins the party, but Dixon is clearly a temporary character as he only has 2 arts and isn't controllable. Might be best to not use him then. We fight a bunch of the weaker Mechon because Metal Face lost all interest in even attempting to kill us at this point. They really provide no challenge at all compared to the boss fights we just had, so it's not very engaging. The track Unfinished Business plays here during this fight and the previous cutscene. It's the only time in the entire base game that this track plays, but since it doesn't loop, it is almost certain to run out during the Mechon trash fight. Or even earlier if you spend too much time setting up your party and looking at the new characters before the fight even starts. Especially if your recording is being slowed down by some note-taking. After that, it's replaced by generic boss music. I don't like how the track is used. Though in this case I recognize that it's very much for personal reasons. Nevertheless, I will make my case. Despite how much I'm bringing up the soundtrack in these videos, I actually hardly notice the soundtrack on first playthrough in any game. It's only for these videos that I'm painstakingly noting how each track is used. Most of the time I beat games while entirely unable to hum even a single track, yet as a rule of thumb, games with good soundtracks and which also use those tracks well can elicit a powerful emotional reaction in me when I hear a track or motif played again. Both Xenoblade 2 and 3 hit that spot for me with the title theme, utilizing motifs spread throughout the rest of the soundtrack. Every time a motif or track is used in an emotional moment, my brain subconsciously builds associations between that track and the emotions of that scene. Even Xenoblade 1 manages to do that with a single specific track which hasn't come up yet. Overall though, Xenoblade 1 does this best with gameplay tracks. Each area's music fills you with a certain feeling as you spend hours in that area, so when you hear the Bionis Leg theme or the Call Me 9 theme, you're reminded of all the time you spent there, and those feelings come back. The same I'd say is true for You Will Know Our Names, which is not only an epic track in its own right, but cements itself in your brain through countless unique monster fights, some of which will induce more struggle than the story bosses will. Over a playthrough, you will have many moments of just barely besting a tough foe after a lengthy fight, and all that emotion attaches itself to You Will Know Our Names. Meanwhile, Unfinished Business only plays once in the entire game and doesn't even loop, meaning it fails to build a lasting emotional connection with me. Remember, I rarely think of soundtracks when playing normally and only notice them in very rare circumstances, mostly through repetition in important moments. Every time I hear this track, it's almost like hearing it again for the first time. However, there are of course exceptions to this rule. There are tracks that stick with me even without repetition. These are usually boss tracks. It helps if the boss is hard enough that the track can loop for a long time during many attempts, but that's not always necessary. A really good boss track will build subconscious associations with that very specific experience. Not only will the track heighten the fight itself by setting a strong emotional tone, but hearing the track later will then make me recall the full struggle against the boss along with my subsequent victory. If they really want some bonus points, they can combine both approaches, using motifs spread throughout the game to build associations, and then carry that forward into the boss track, which both stands on its own as a banger theme, but also has a ton of emotional weight to back it up. Meanwhile, because Unfinished Business primarily plays during the cutscene leading up to the fight, I really don't notice it. I'm focusing on the events, the action, the dialogue, and it's not like Engage the Enemy, which plays repeatedly during these fight cutscenes to the point where the association sticks. But it also doesn't stick as a boss track because there's no fight worth remembering, and the music only lasts for about 2 minutes of combat before it's replaced by a much more generic track. Even less if you spend time in the menu. I see some praising the track because only playing it here makes it special.
And this is the only time this song plays in the entire game, right, Future Connected? Right? Because of that, it elevates this encounter further by ensuring that it has a personal connection to Dunban, Rind, Sharla, and Shulk.
But I absolutely can't agree to that. Anyway, I've talked about the track for long enough to loop it, which means if you've only played the game once and never listened to the soundtrack separately, I now have most of your subconscious associations with it, and that makes it special to me. After the battle, a cutscene starts and things are looking desperate. Dunban continues to be anime with every fibre of his being. He really went,
"You may be able to block a projectile, but let's see if you can block this!"
before attacking with his weeb stick, huh? The answer is yes, by the way. I guess even anti-mechon swords can't harm phased mechon. Unless you trust the wiki, of course. Oops. Metalface prepares a final attack to take them all out. He could have prepared it earlier while distracting us with the weaker mechon, but he clearly cares more about toying with us than actually winning. Due to this strategic slip-up from our menacing mechon, our heroes are saved last second by some weird bird called a Telethia that scares it away with green lightning bolts. How lucky that he didn't attack sooner. Shulk takes the distraction as an opportunity to push the Monado forcefully and slowly into Metalface's arm, which I'm not sure if it does something or not. But it does make me wonder what would happen if you tried the same against a Hom. If you pinned them to a wall and pushed the tip of the energy blade into them with all your might, would it eventually kill them through blunt force trauma cracking their ribs? Is it simply that it cannot cut Homs? Or can it not harm them by any means? It bounced off Fiora, so I'd assume the latter. In that case, this really shouldn't work if Metalface simply counts as being Homs. Not only that, but the arm starts glowing as Shulk is melting the steel, which also brings up the question of the temperature of Shulk's lightsaber, but let's not even get into that. Ooh, a vision! That can distract from the confusion of this world's mechanics. We're at some tower with a massive miscolored man who's calling Shulk the true heir to the Monado. There's some new grey-haired girl here, alongside her father, who's got wings on his head. The massive man is dead, Metalface is here, and Dunban asks who or what someone is, possibly referring to Metalface. There's another face here that Shulk wants vengeance against. He cuts off Metalface's arm with a big Monado Buster. He seems to get ready for killing blow against Metalface to avenge the Emperor and the Fiora, and finally we see the other face be damaged, revealing a Homs inside. Wait, so the faces are just regular mechs? There's a Homs pilot inside that makes them count as human? Or maybe the pilot is just separate from the laser sword reflecting LEDs? But hey, there was an Emperor mentioned, so maybe we get some of that sweet colony backstory that will totally explain everything. At this point, it doesn't even seem like Homs are aware of any non-colony settlements, so maybe this is an empire that rules from the shadows or something. I don't know. I'm not coping, you are. Back in reality, Metalface swipes Shulk away and confirms he was indeed wounded by the Monado there. We see the Telethia leaving, and Metalface flees alongside 2 Bronze Faces. The rest of them must have actually been killed by the Telethia, I guess. That's some extreme power to kill multiple faces with ease, and likely injure the rest enough that they had to fall back. The 5 of us present absolutely could not kill the remaining 3, so they must have been really scared or really injured to flee. So once again, Metalface flees from us even though we absolutely couldn't finish him off in our current state. He could come back in 5 minutes and finish the job, but he doesn't. We see the Telethia return to someone who speaks in a familiar voice.
You did well.
So, he's not just a dream man who lives in the Monado, but he can still speak to Shulk telepathically and appear in his dreams. He sure has some link to the Monado, but what? The Telethia acts like his pet, and it appears he can command it, so he presumably watched everything unfold and sent the Telethia to save us, and now he has more plans for Shulk. How mysterious. The Juju arc. Everyone's favorite section of the game. Juju is notoriously hated, and so are the Ethermines. Somewhat understandable, actually. Juju has exactly the type of spirits needed to qualify for the party, but seemingly lacks any skills we could use, thus he comes off as whiny. Even though he has his own gun and apparently some training with it, that's practically concealed from the player, which makes it seem like he's helpless and useless. But despite somewhat falsely portraying him as useless in a fight, they didn't capitalize on that. They could have emphasized that he needs to learn to do what's in his means to help others. Though, to be honest, the same could be said about Sharla right now. If she wants to help the survivors, she needs to go back and help the refugees right now. Nearly everyone at the camp are children or old people, so they can't defend themselves and struggle with many basic tasks as our side questing shows. The only difference between her and Juju is that Juju is portrayed as only being able to help out at the camp, while Sharla is technically capable of fighting. Juju has a gun, but it's been concealed in most scenes and we haven't seen him use it yet. I got a vision earlier about him being good with it, but I won't show it again because I'm not Xenoblade 1. So, despite Juju and Sharla having so much in common, Juju is the one that everyone hates because he's helpless enough that we have to save him thrice. I get it. It's not the most engaging motivator, especially when reused. I also still don't care enough about even the main characters to feel emotions about the possibility of their death, so Juju doesn't stand a chance. The last rescue is in the Ethermines, a short but very uninteresting dungeon accompanied by a track that's dull and seems to lull me into a sleep whenever I hear it. So, he has everything stacked against him. What really irks me, however, is how little story there's been overall in these 3 chapters. Chapter 3 was just a dungeon with very little story revelations, only introducing us to the silver-haired mystery boy as well as giving Shulk a new Monado art. Chapter 4 introduces us to Sharla and Juju, gives us a bit of their backstory, and forces us to go rescue Juju twice. Chapter 5 is again just a dungeon, but introduces Othoron and tells us a little more about Sharla. Only at the very end do we get some clues from Sword about how the world works, and we get the vision that will define the next leg of our journey. So, we went from the end of chapter 2 with a strong sense of direction to kinda just meandering about for several hours and spending far more time doing side quests than anything else. It's not like the character work has been able to carry the story either. Ryan and Shulk have one moment in the cave reflecting on why the Mechon attack, which is a topic dropped as soon as it appeared. Shulk states openly how he wishes he could have saved Fiora, which isn't really reflected in his actions, and could have been brought into the dialogue in a more natural way. And I guess we get a glimpse into Shulk's motivation, being that he's primarily interested in the Monado because of the old legend we already saw him enthralled by on the bench, not because of his dead parents. Then there's nothing until the very end where they are so close to touching upon something compelling, that maybe Monado's shield could have saved Fiora. But as I said, Shulk's regret isn't really present most of the time and doesn't manifest there either. Chapter 4 does very little for Shulk or Reyn, at most setting up that Shulk isn't sharing his visions and that Reyn is uncomfortable by Sharla's flirting. Juju is set up in a way to make him seem whiny and useless, and Sharla is just kinda hostile and incompetent. Could have gotten some chemistry between Reyn and Sharla if they want to set up some love triangle there, but nope. Could have shown consequences of Shulk keeping quiet about his visions to justify Reyn's later outburst, but why bother? Could have contrasted Sharla and Juju's stance on helping the refugees so we can explore what they fundamentally believe in, but nah. Then in Chapter 5 we squander even more. Sharla might be feeling like she's lost everything and has no choice but to abandon the refugees. Is she shown to be torn by that? No. Do we see her crack, stripping her character down to its lowest fundamentals so we can see who she truly is? Nah. Do we get some strong bonding once she and Juju's reunited? Well, not yet, that's for sure, and I would advise against betting money on it being in the next chapter either. We haven't really been following what was promised with the main hook. Fiora was killed by Metalface and the boys swear revenge. Then immediately realize they have no idea where to go, so they just pick a direction, hope it works, and spend 3 chapters making no progress whatsoever until the main story forced itself upon them and the Monado got frustrated and told Shulk where to go at the very end. The hunt for Metalface hasn't played into any of the decisions in these chapters. Shulk and Reyn just help out where they can and fight Mechon because why not? But the events aren't tied to their core motivations. Instead, it's all about Sharla, which means we have to start over with establishing characters and motivations, thus squandering all the momentum Chapter 2 set up. What could have fixed a lot of this apparent lack of direction is my suggestion from earlier, that Sharla should have been sent to Colony 9 to get help from Dunban or whoever else can use the Monad. In Chapter 3, we could encounter her in Tephra Cave where we get some of her backstory and motivation out of the way. We can also combine the plotline of saving Reyn from the Arachno with the plotline of convincing Sharla about the Monado's power. That way they would both be convinced at once, and it's one less time in the story that Shulk has to convince someone that he can totally see the future. We could then also directly tie the motivation of Sharla to that of the rest of the party by having her describe the attack being led by a large Mechon with a face, who Shulk and Reyn would assume is Metalface. That way we are immediately granted a sense of direction and it will feel like we are progressing the main story, even if Zord ended up being the wrong guy and a bit of a dead end. Once out of the cave, she'd come with us to spot the buggy, immediately chastising Juju on the spot for nearly ending up killed, and he could justify his actions by saying he was scouting for dangers and wanted to see how much land the Mechon currently covered. Hell, show him using his gun but being outmatched so that he's less whiny and more of a capable kid who's a bit too young to realize when he's in over his head. Of course, I'd still want him and Sharla to reflect on their duty to the refugees versus their duty to anyone else left at the colony, but beyond that, the rest of Chapter 4 and 5 could play out mostly the same. But there's no changing the game we got. We can only learn lessons from it and take them with us to our own future endeavors. And at least now we are finally through with one of the worst sections of the game. These 3 chapters killed my excitement for the game during my first playthrough, and I've seen it do the same to many others, which tells me that a rewrite would be needed. Though beyond that, it could also help if the developers could show some restraint with the side quests. 5 hours of side questing for 40 minutes of story in Chapter 4 is utterly bizarre to me. This was an issue in the last video, and it will continue to be an issue in the next ones. If you are playing for the questing, combat and exploration, then you'll likely not be bothered by this, but for anyone who's primarily looking to experience the masterpiece of a story that they've heard so much about, then all the menial side quests will do nothing but get in the way. We have a lot of chapters left ahead of us, so let's see how it all unfolds.